Chapter 141, The Fight for the Position of Vice Prefect. William was praising himself for thinking of such an amazing strategy in order to deal with the bastards who dared to challenge his authority. HMP, since you dare to fight, then you should be prepared for the consequences. William laughed inside his heart as he watched Drake's and Spencer's faces turn red from anger. Honored instructors, I know that this might be sudden, but can you allow this fight to happen? William asked. I need to fill up the other positions so that the management of the first years will go smoothly. I will allow it, Grant said with amusement. Let's go to the Coliseum. Since it is another battle royale, it will be the best place to hold the competition. Drake and Spencer were cursing William internally. If not for the presence of the instructors, they might have already given him the middle finger. They were already regretting the fact that they had dared to challenge such a shameless person. Even so, since they had already made a declaration, they had to go along with it even though they were bound to lose. This William is very sly, Andy muttered. With this, no one will dare to challenge his authority in the future. The instructors, who heard him, nodded their heads in agreement. This was the first time they had seen such a character appear in the martial classes, and it gave them a very refreshing feeling. The students of the magic and spirit divisions noted this strategy in their hearts. If they were to become the head prefects of their own dormitories, then imitating William's approach would ensure that their position would remain safe and secure. William has grown a lot since the last time we saw him, a beautiful young lady with midnight blue hair said as he held her lover's hand. My cousin usually likes to act in a low-key manner, but since he was forced to be in the spotlight, he is milking it to the fullest. The handsome young man with short red hair nodded his head in agreement. I never thought that he'd become the head prefect as soon as he entered the Royal Academy. I'm very impressed. So you say, but were you not also the head prefect during your first year? It's because there weren't any strong individuals back then. It's not because there was a lack of strong individuals, the beautiful lady said as she leaned her head on his chest. You're just too strong. Perhaps the handsome redhead replied as he kissed his lover's forehead. We will visit him after the selection for the head prefect of our year is over. Make sure not to tease him too much when we meet up with him, okay? I understand. Don't worry, I will support you this year as well. Thank you. Your favorite ovals at n/vl/bin.com. Inside the Coliseum, Drake and Spencer stood with their heads held high. The other students, on the other hand, were gripping their weapons in anticipation. If they could kill even one of these boys, then the chance to become the vice prefect is assured. The Coliseum had an enchantment placed on it, similar to the enchanted forest. Anyone who died would automatically be ejected off of the battleground and taken to a safe location. Let the battle begin. William raised his fist and announced the start of the competition. The students roared as they rushed toward the two boys with bloodshot eyes. Drake and Spencer held their ground and unleashed their full power. Since they were about to die anyway, why not take as many of these bastards as they could with them? The battle didn't become as one-sided as William initially guessed. Sure, Drake and Spencer were disadvantaged, but they were two of the strongest students among the first years in the martial division. Both of them went all out and wore their enchanted armors, accessories, and weapons. It made them more formidable and more deadly. Spencer danced across the battlefield using his superior mobility in order to dodge and attack his pursuers. Every time he thrust his spear, a pain-filled scream would follow. Drake, on the other hand, was like an immovable mountain. The pressure he gave off was not something that a regular student could hope to attain. Even so, he received several injuries from the united attacks that were coming his way. Not bad, William muttered as he observed the battle. The two of them are quite capable. Don't you think so, too, Mama? Me. Ella nodded in agreement. Although the two boys were weaker than her in her war ibex form, she had to agree that they were very competent fighters. For a moment, those who were spectating thought that a miracle would happen. However, all of these expectations disappeared when a soft buzz reached Drake's ears. *T. Drake cursed when he realized that the one who had killed him inside the enchanted forest had struck during a critical time. He was currently fending off 4 attackers, and the archer chose to attack just as he unleashed his attack. It was impossible to dodge, so all he could do was endure. He hoped that his armor would be strong enough to block the arrow from the hateful black-haired girl who had backstabbed him for the second time. The arrow hit its target, and Drake's body stiffened before turning into particles of light. Adamantium arrow. William raised an eyebrow. This girl really is scary. She still has trump cards up her sleeve. After killing Drake, Priscilla raised her head to look at William for a brief moment before aiming at Spencer in the distance. She fired 4 arrows consecutively, forming beautiful arcs in the air. When the arrows neared Spencer, they all detonated and gave a blinding flash of light. All the students, including Spencer, were momentarily blinded by the attack. Priscilla knocked another adamantium arrow on her bow and took aim. The moment she released the arrow, a gust of wind followed suit. Her black hair danced as she narrowed her eyes to look at her target. Spencer's head was blown apart like a watermelon before turning into particles of light. So decisive, William commented. Not bad. Andy rubbed his chin with a smile as he looked at Priscilla. He had already intended to make her and William his apprentices during their stay at the Royal Academy. He was very satisfied with their performance and he hoped that they would continue to grow to become experts in the field of archery. The students this year are quite competent, one of the martial instructors commented with a grin. Looks like, this year, we will have a chance to teach those arrogant magicians a thing or two. The other instructors nodded their heads in agreement. They had long accepted that they would remain in the lowest ranked position again this year, but the appearance of William, Priscilla, Drake, and Spencer brought them hope. Priscilla tucked her hair behind her ear as she gazed at the boy that had beaten her during the competition. Unlike Drake and Spencer, she experienced firsthand how strong William was. She would definitely not underestimate him ever again. Seeing the beautiful girl's passionate gaze, William casually flipped his hair and nodded his head in acknowledgement. From this moment onwards, I declare Priscilla Norel Grandfall, the new vice prefect of the Solaris dormitory, William announced. Also, I will be selecting a few more students to become the officers under my management. Even though the position of the vice prefect is already taken, there are still other slots to fill. So, everyone, do your best. Those who perform well after a month's time will become the next batch of officers for the first years. The students cheered in unison. They were quite happy that they would be given a fair chance to show off their abilities and win an official position instead of having to use bribes, or lower themselves to become William's lackeys in order to raise their ranks in the Solaris dormitory. Chapter 142, Glory to the Demon Race. R18. Disclaimer, this chapter contains R18 scenes. The excitement in the first-year martial class division died down after a few days. William's stellar performance had taken a back seat because the competition for the head prefect of the martial, spirit, and magic division classes in different year levels had started. Understand that being the commander over an entire division was a position that no one would allow to slip past their fingers. It was the easiest way to get noticed by the king of the Hellan kingdom and receive his good graces. William, Ella, and Kenneth wanted to see how Est would do in his competition, but they were barred from entering the magic division. When William asked the guards why, they only told him that the martial classes didn't have the qualifications to enter the grounds of the spirit and magic division classes. The red-headed boy was dumbfounded by this kind of treatment, but he didn't pursue the matter. William had a meeting with Grant after the battle in the Colosseum, and the latter had told him about the unfair treatment that the martial division classes were receiving from the two other divisions. Grant added that if William were to experience these things, he shouldn't get angry on the spot and just let it be for the time being. This was the sad truth in the southern continent. Only those with spiritual and magic powers were treated as if they were special from the rest. As for those who didn't have magic, they would be treated just like everyone else inside the Royal Academy even if they were a noble. To think that there is such discrimination here in the Royal Academy, Kenneth wrinkled his nose in annoyance. It's fine, William said as the three of them went back to the Solaris dormitory. Since they don't allow the martial classes to enter their divisions, then I will, also, not allow them to enter ours. Kenneth gave him the "you can do that" look, and William only chuckled at his roommate's dumbfounded expression. Of course I can do that, William replied. Just watch me. William approached the guards that were guarding the gates of the first-year martial division. He then showed them his prefect badge and gave out his order. Although the two guards looked at him in a weird manner, they promised that they would enforce the rules that he had given them. Kenneth looked at how William used his authority in a very casual manner. You are a very petty person, you know that, right? I'm one that likes to hold grudges. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Kenneth shook his head helplessly as he followed his roommate back to their dormitory room. William was feeling very smug about his blatant use of his authority, that he had completely forgotten that the few friends that had a relationship with belonged to the other divisions. This order of his would make Ian ridicule him in the not-so-distant future. Sir, the hot water you wanted is here, the pretty girl who was working inside the inn said as she knocked on the door of a room. A handsome man wearing elegant clothes opened the door and made a gesture for her to come in. When the pretty girl was safely inside his room, he locked the door and faced her with a grin. The pretty girl stood still in the center of the room in a daze. The handsome man walked towards the bed and motioned for her to come to him. Come, the man ordered. Yes, the girl replied as she walked towards him. She stopped half a meter from the man and waited patiently for his next orders. The man lifted the girl's chin as he looked at her clouded eyes. He had placed a powerful suggestion spell on her earlier to come to his room in the middle of the night when everyone inside the inn was sleeping. It was very easy for him to empower the suggestion spell because the pretty girl took a liking to him when she guided him to his room. The major factor that empowered the spell was because the girl was only a commoner, and had no resistance to magic. He only needed to wait until the effect of the spell matured in order to have his victim willingly enter his arms. Time to have a taste. The handsome man lowered his lips and kissed the pretty girl. The girl's body stiffened for a brief moment before it became lax. The handsome man held her waist firmly to prevent her from collapsing on the floor. A minute later, their lips parted as the man licked his lips in satisfaction. Get the latest chapters on n/felbin.com. Such a sweet and innocent life force, the handsome man sighed in appreciation. Now, the question remains, should I pluck your cherry or not? The girl offered no reply. She leaned weakly on the man's chest as if all of her strength had been sucked out from her lips. If the man really decided to have his way with her, the girl would definitely not be able to form any sort of resistance. The handsome man expertly removed her upper clothes so her beautiful breasts appeared before his eyes. He then lowered his lips to kiss the pink tips that were fanning the flames of his lust, before placing them inside his mouth to lick and suck on them. He was very satisfied with the softness and volume of her breast, causing him to enjoy them to the fullest. The handsome man spent a few minutes fondling, kissing, licking, and sucking the girl's proud peaks, while soft moans escaped the girl's lips. He only stopped when he had enough, and prepared to go to the next phase of his night of pleasure. As his hand was slowly making its way towards the pretty girl's lower body, he heard the voice of the owner of the inn calling out her daughter's name from the first floor. Ava, the voice called. Where are you, girl? The handsome man clicked his tongue because the opportunity had been lost. He knew that he couldn't jeopardize his mission just for the sake of satisfying his carnal desires on a mere commoner, no matter how pretty she was. The handsome man whispered in the girl's ears as he strengthened the suggestion spell that had already taken hold of her mind and body. You will forget everything that has happened. You will not remember my face, my name, or anything that is related to me. Do you understand? Yes, the pretty girl replied weakly. The handsome man watched as the pretty girl tottered towards the door. Even in her weakened state, the pretty girl didn't forget to bow and lock the door behind her. This is only a small mishap, the handsome man muttered as he looked outside the window of his room. Once I enter the Royal Academy, I will follow my lord's order and indulge myself on the beautiful bodies of the most talented ladies in the kingdom while I suck the life force from their luscious lips. I can't wait to have a taste. The man grinned as he held back the laughter inside his chest. Glory to the demon race. Chapter 143, Inner Circle of Friends. 2 days passed and the head prefects of the different divisions had emerged victorious from their competitions. William was pleasantly surprised when he received the list of the new head prefects. Est had successfully become the head prefect for the magic division of the first-year students. However, William's surprise didn't end there. The name that appeared for the 4th year of the magic division was a name that he knew too well. Matthew von Ainsworth, head prefect of the magic class division, 4th year. It seems that big brother Matthew is not being low profile here in the academy, William muttered as he sat down on the bed. Matthew was aware of William's current condition because Leah's and his parents' letters had arrived at the Hellan Royal Academy. His parents, Mordred and Anna, asked Matthew to look after his cousin and make sure to keep his secret safe while he explored the world outside of Lant. William and Matthew had a very good relationship, and both of them treated each other as a real brother instead of a cousin. With that said, William was very happy that he could hug his big brother's thighs if push came to shove. In regards to the way the martial classes were being treated by the other divisions, William couldn't think of a good plan to reverse the current situation. All he could do was to ensure that the people under his wing would perform well and put the arrogant spirit and magic divisions back in their rightful place. At the end of the day, it all comes down to strength. William sighed as he closed the document in his hand. Master was right. Those who have the bigger fist dictate the rules. The weak can only nod their heads in submission or perish in the aftermath. The survival of the fittest, or the law of the jungle, was the most basic law that those who could wield power followed. William understood this concept, but he didn't like it. Even though it wasn't perfect, the laws back on Earth could force the authorities to take the necessary actions once a citizen used the power of the masses. This power was so great that even those people in high-ranking positions had no choice but to compromise once this move was used. Unfortunately, there is no social media in this world, William mused. Just one post and it would definitely go viral. Ella rested her head on William's lap, and the boy unconsciously patted her head. This was the scene that Kenneth saw when he entered the room after checking out the latest news of the other divisions. Kenneth grinned as he approached William and tapped his shoulder. There are people looking for you outside the gates. They can't come in because a certain someone prevented them from doing so. People looking for me. William frowned. Do you know them? I only know 3 of them, Kenneth replied. Est, Ian, and Isaac. Also, there are 2 more people. One of them had the same hair color as you, while the other was a beautiful lady with midnight blue hair. Ella lifted her head from William's lap because she recognized the 2 people that Kenneth had described. Me. Yes, Mama. It's definitely big brother and big sister. Me. Okay, let's meet them. William nodded his head then thanked Kenneth for passing on their message. Kenneth decided to follow behind William. He was very curious about the people that had a relationship with him. William didn't mind bringing Kenneth along with him. In fact, he wanted to introduce him to his big brother and big sister as the first friend he made inside the academy. Also, since Kenneth was his roommate, it would be a great idea if they get to know each other, so that they could look after this delicate silver gray-haired boy when William was not around. Big brother, big sister, Est, and Isaac, thank you for visiting me, William greeted them with a smile as he met them at the gates. He then looked at the guards who had carried out his orders with a smile. These 2 people are the head prefects of the magic division classes. In the future, please, allow them to enter the premises if they are looking for me. William then raised his chin and pointed it at Ian. As for this snot-nosed pansy, feel free to keep him out of the premises. He's just a side character. He is not important. Why you? Ian gnashed his teeth in anger. He had come here with Est to thank William because the strategy he used helped them to win the competition for the head prefect in the magic division. To think that not only did William ban them from entering, the red-headed boy even explicitly told the guards to not let him pass because he was a side character and not important. Ian was so close to lunging at William and beating him up to a pulp. Unfortunately, the shepherd hadn't exited the gate and hid behind the guards that were watching over it. Est gave a light cough as he looked at Ian with an apologetic gaze. He then moved closer to Ian and whispered something in his ear. I'll ask him to let you pass after our meeting, Est whispered. Until then, stay here and take note of the people who tried to enter the gates aside from us. I believe that they are people who want to recruit William into their party. This is something that we cannot allow to happen. Understood. Wbnovels uptez on nov/l/b.com. Although Ian was still reluctant at being left out, he still nodded his head in acknowledgement. William had been a hot topic in the spirit and magic divisions. There were plenty of people who wanted to make him part of their team. The reason why they came here right after the ceremony was to ask William to join their party when they entered dungeons and domains in the future. The three children, Est, Ian, and Isaac knew full well how powerful William could be in a battle. If the other teams were to successfully poach him, wouldn't that lower their chances of clearing the hard dungeons that were available in the academy? This was something that they couldn't allow to happen. Understood. Ian nodded his head. He was someone who could think of the bigger picture. Thank you, Est replied. Don't worry, I'll convince him. Just make sure to stop butting heads with him after I succeed in the negotiations. Okay, Ian sighed. There was nothing he could do, but accept the fact that William was no longer an ordinary student that he could bully. He was the head prefect of a division, which meant that he had to give him some face in front of the public. Matthew and Leah were talking to William, but they were also paying close attention to Est and the twins that were always around him. Although they knew that they were William's friends, the two of them were still wary of their backgrounds. For them, William was too trusting. Since that was the case, they took it upon themselves to keep watch on the people that were trying to get close to him. What they didn't know was that Ella was a very good judge of character. Since she had already vouched for Est, Isaac, Ian, and Kenneth's temperament, William would definitely keep them in his inner circle of friends. Chapter 144, Collaboration. Big brother, I knew you were awesome, but I didn't know you were this awesome. William flattered his big brother, which made the latter pat his head affectionately. I thought that you would be keeping a low profile once you arrived at the capital, but it seems that you're not someone that wants to get ordered around. Matthew replied with a smile. Haha, I just want to keep Mama Ella with me all the time. I didn't think things through and made myself stand out by accident. I've already sent Grandpa a letter informing him that both of us have become head prefects. I'm sure that he'll be laughing out loud once he reads it. He will definitely not keep silent about it and brag about it to his friends and acquaintances. Yikes. William could already imagine his grandpa's smug expression as he told his friends that his two grandsons were the big shots in the Hellan Royal Academy. Est and Isaac were only listening from the side, but they were surprised to find out that this person was related to William. Also, Matthew was their senior and also a head prefect in the Royal Academy. Est made a mental note to gather information about William's big brother once he returned to his dormitory room. Ah, big sister Leah, you've grown more beautiful since the last time I saw you. William complimented his big sister. He then glanced at his big brother and gave him a knowing smile. Big brother, if you don't keep watch over big sister, several bees will be attracted to her. Don't worry, even if they come in swarms, I'll just burn them all to the ground, Matthew answered with confidence. In the years that the two of them had stayed in the academy, several students, from different grades, would always confess their feelings to Leah. This was another reason why Matthew did his best to become the head prefect, so he could protect his fiancée from these obnoxious bugs. Yes, Leah became his fiancée after her father, Sabas, and his grandpa James, helped with the matchmaking. The two of them would get married at the end of their 4th year at the Royal Academy once they returned to Lant. If not for the fact that the two were truly in love with each other, Sabas might have convinced his daughter otherwise. Your way with words has greatly improved over the years, little Will. Leah teased. There are many in our department who have found you to their liking. Should I play matchmaker for you? Your big sister knows a lot of beautiful ladies. You can't. Est wasn't able to stop himself from voicing his protest out loud. When he realized what he had done, his face immediately flushed in embarrassment. William was surprised by Est's sudden outburst, but he just smiled and winked at his big sister Leah. Big sister, I'm not in a hurry to find a girlfriend right now, William replied. I came here, to the Royal Academy, to learn things, not to form a romantic relationship with anyone. Oh, Leah raised an eyebrow. Well, if you change your mind, you know where to find me. Big sister, if possible, introduce me to them some other time. I thought you didn't come here to form romantic relationships with anyone. Forming a romantic relationship and forming connections are two different things, William argued. It is best to know a lot of people so that you know who to talk to in case you need to ask for a favor. All right. Leah nodded her head in understanding. I'll introduce you to them when you're not too busy with your duties. Thank you, big sister, you are the best. William gave her a light hug, and the latter hugged him back. Kenneth returned with some snacks and refreshments and served them on the table. After becoming the head prefect of the first years, William was given a bigger room that fit his position. Naturally, he asked the instructors to allow Kenneth to remain his roommate, so the two were still living together. William and his guests ate their snacks while having random conversations. After half an hour, Matthew stood up from his seat and bid his goodbye. We can't stay here for long because I still have duties waiting for me back in the 4th year division. Matthew patted William's shoulder. However, if you have questions in regards to being a head prefect, don't hesitate to ask me. I will inform the guards to allow you to enter the premises. Thank you, big brother, William replied. When I encounter difficulties, I'll immediately go to you and ask for your help. Just don't go causing trouble. Of course not. I'm a good boy. William and Matthew exchanged a knowing glance before the latter nodded his head and left the room with Leah. As soon as he left, Est was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. He was quite sensitive when it came to people observing him at a close distance. Because of this, he wasn't able to tell William the real reason for his visit. Now that the third and fourth wheels were gone, Est finally decided to get right down to business. William, I came here to ask a favor from you, Est stated. Is this about Ian? William snorted. Fine. I'll allow him entry, but only when he is with you. I don't want him to go out of his way to visit the Marshall Division just to bother me. Thank you, Est chuckled. However, that is not the main reason for my visit. It's not. No. I'm here to propose a collaboration. A collaboration. William tilted his head in confusion. What do you have in mind? It's something like this, Est started his explanation. Est told William that there would be monthly and quarterly assessments for each head prefect and they would be required to visit a dungeon or a domain once a month. For dungeons, having a party of 5 to 6 people was ideal. Est asked William to become part of his party permanently and not join the other parties that would later come to him and ask him to join them. William understood the gist of Est's proposal and readily agreed on it. He had fought side by side with Est and the twins in the past. By his standards, the three of them were very capable individuals and forming a party with them would bring benefits for him. He then looked at the delicate-looking boy who was seated next to him and asked for his opinion. How about you, Kenneth? William asked. Do you want to join our team as well? Can I? Kenneth answered. For him, as long as he was together with William, in order to observe him, he didn't mind tagging along in their party for dungeon and domain explorations. Of course you can. William patted his chest. With this, there are already 5 of us. However, I'm feeling a bit down. Feeling down? Est inquired. Why? William sighed. A party made up of only boys. Are we going to form a boy band? How about we get a girl to join our party so that we will have a muse? Although the 3 children didn't understand the term boy band, they realized that what William said held some truth. Est and Isaac had mixed feelings about William's statement. They wanted to say something, but in the end, they held back and just sighed internally. How about you invite Priscilla to join us? Kenneth proposed. With her skill, the strength of our party will improve by leaps and bounds. Priscilla, William crossed his arms over his chest as he considered his roommate's proposal. In regards to fighting ability, Priscilla is a good choice. However, William wasn't sure if adding her to their team was a good idea. Let me consider it first, William said after careful thought. William then looked at his dependable mama Ella. Me. She's good, but she's not loyal. Me. How about her character? Me. So. Me. I see. Let's observe her for now then. Visit and Felbin. CM for Wbnovels. Ella nodded her head in acknowledgement. Priscilla was a neutral person according to Ella's view. She could shift from being a good friend to becoming an enemy. Although she didn't say outright that Priscilla would become her baby's enemy, there was a 50-50 chance for that to happen. Ella wouldn't take the risk and allow Priscilla to join their team after she had carefully observed the person's behavior. Only when she had determined that Priscilla didn't pose any threat to her baby then and only then would she give William the go signal and allow her to join their party. Seeing William's positive response to his invitation, Est felt that their victory was assured. With such a powerful shepherd on their side, getting a passing grade was already in the bag. The first dungeon exploration will begin at the end of the month, Est stated. Since we are only first years, there are only 3 dungeons available to us. The Orc Fortress, the Hound Bastion, and the Goblin Crypt. I'll come and find you once I get more information about the dungeons. Until then, I'll keep in touch. William didn't hear everything that Est had said. His mind froze when he heard the dungeon name Goblin Crypt. Ella, who was lying beside William, opened her eyes wide. She then looked at her baby and found William looking back at her. Both of them were thinking about the same thing and it was mainly due to the fact that they had entered the Goblin Crypt through the Ring of Conquest. This needs further investigation, William thought as he unconsciously rubbed the ring on his finger. I wonder if this Goblin Crypt is the same Goblin Crypt that I have been visiting for the last 13 years of my life. Chapter 145, Turn the Royal Academy Upside Down. Good morning, Professor. Good morning. Good morning, Professor. Good morning to you, too. A handsome young man, who seemed to be in his early 20s, greeted the 2 students who were looking at him with a flushed expression. Visit and Felbin. CM for Wbnovels. Today is the first day of class, the handsome professor said with a smile. If you don't hurry up, the 2 of you are going to be late. This is not a good trait that beautiful and talented girls, such yourselves, should possess. Although he said this in a stern manner, the smile on his face made the 2 girls feel their hearts beat wildly inside their chests. Seeing their reactions, the handsome professor sighed and took 4 candies from his pocket. It can't be helped. Take these and be on your way. The 2 girls giggled and accepted the professor's gift. They then walked away while sneaking glances at their handsome professor. Professor Carter is so dreamy. I wonder if he has a girlfriend. He doesn't have a girlfriend. I had already asked around and this information has been confirmed. Handsome, talented, and the youngest professor in the Royal Academy, the pretty girl with shoulder-length brown side. There are rumors that the king himself is planning to nurture him to become a high-ranking official. Actually, that rumor is actually true, the girl's best friend replied as she looked around their surroundings. According to a reliable source, Professor Carter only needs to complete 1 year of teaching in the Royal Academy before he is taken as the assistant of the Prime Minister. Is this true? If yes, then I'd better get serious and catch his attention. Good luck, but the two of us are going to be rivals. Please, go easy on me, will you? Why don't we share him between the two of us? The pretty girl with brown hair proposed. That way, he will not be able to cheat on us even if there are other girls who plan to hook up with him. Sounds like a plan, the girl's best friend replied. Oh my gosh, this candy is so delicious. I wonder how it was made. You're right, the brown-haired girl agreed. This is probably a very expensive candy that is not sold in the capital. Maybe we can ask for more after classes end. What do you think? I like the sound of that. Remember, you're not allowed to take the lead. Deal. Carter was walking towards the dining hall when a sliver of power passed through his body. A smile appeared on his face because it meant that the two girls had eaten the candies that he had given them. By now, the suggestion magic that he had infused on those same candies had already planted a seed inside their subconscious minds. As they ate more of his candies, they would gradually fall into his hands and become willing slaves that would help him capture the peerless and talented girls inside the Helan Royal Academy. Aside from the two girls earlier, he had already given his candies to 4 others. He wasn't in a hurry to corrupt all of them because the school year had just started. He planned to take his time in training them. He wanted to mold their bodies and minds to be the perfect slaves that he could use to turn the Royal Academy upside down. William and Kenneth had arrived at the dining hall after taking a shower inside their dormitory room. The other students who had followed William in their training were, surprisingly, sharing the same table with them. Priscilla was seated across from William and Kenneth as she ate her sandwich in peace. Since she was the vice prefect of the first years, it was only natural for her to be seen with William. However, what the shepherd didn't understand was that, aside from her, Spencer, Drake, and the boy named Conrad, along with his lackeys were seated at the same table as him. Just like Priscilla, Spencer, and Drake were seated across William, while Conrad sat beside him. William didn't say anything, because although it was odd, all of them were in the same school year. Since he couldn't reserve the entire table as his own, having people with familiar faces around him was the next best thing. Head Prefect, you said that in a month's time, you will choose the new batch of officers, isn't that right? Drake asked. Yes, William replied with a smile. Are you interested? Very interested. Then you have to do your best. I will only pick capable individuals, William stated. However, the way you are now, you won't qualify for any position I have in mind. Why? Drake inquired. I am confident in my strength. The other students who were eating inside the dining hall perked their ears to listen to their conversation. Earlier, the dining hall was still noisy, but now, only the sounds of utensils moving could be heard. Strength alone doesn't win battles, William answered. I already mentioned this in my speech when I became head prefect. Besides, individual battles are going to be rare starting from this point onwards. If you want to have a position, you must learn to cooperate in group battles. Matthew had already given William some pointers on how to be a good head prefect. As someone who had held the position for 4 straight years, Matthew was well aware of how difficult it was to maintain his position. Because of this, he didn't skimp on anything and told William exactly what he needed to do in order to succeed. Are you talking about the interdivision battles? Spencer asked. Yes and no, William replied as he drank his fruit juice. Aside from the battle against other divisions, we are also required to complete missions from the academy. Although you can do these missions alone, it will be faster if you do it with a group of people. Think of this as a form of training. But forming teams is only for the weak, Drake mumbled. I want to be like the sword saint who protects the borders of the Helan kingdom. With him alone, the armies of the other 4 kingdoms dare not enter our territory. I want that kind of power. William patted Drake's shoulder and said good luck. He was not against the notion of walking the lonely path towards the peak of the mortal realm. In fact, this was the path that William initially decided to take when he was born in this world. However, he was not meant to travel that lonely path. In this lifetime, he had his mama Ella, and 13 other goats who were willing to fight by his side. With such a loving family backing him up, how could he possibly abandon them and move forward on his own? Head Prefect, do you want to form a team with us for the upcoming dungeon exploration? Conrad asked. About that, I want Priscilla, Spencer, Drake, and you to form your own teams, William answered. I am looking for qualified generals that will help me command our entire division during the battles that we will face in the future. The students who heard William's words nodded their heads in understanding. The domain and dungeon explorations were an integral part of the academy's teaching. Aside from taking missions that would require them to travel outside the academy, the dungeon and domain explorations would help them sharpen their fighting abilities. Can we recruit students from other divisions? Priscilla asked after finishing her sandwich. Or must we rely only on the students of the martial class division? Feel free to recruit students from the other divisions, William answered. The ideal is to form a permanent team with people you can trust. Although all the divisions are our rivals, that doesn't mean that they are our enemy. All students were required to take missions twice a month. By doing this, they would be able to earn academy points that they could exchange for special items from the academy's exchange shop. Once the students had obtained enough academy points, they would be able to buy rare weapons, ability scrolls, enchanted armors, and other items that would help strengthen their bodies and raise their ranks. Top performers of each year grade would be given a special reward by the instructors on a quarterly basis. How about you, Head Prefect? Drake asked. Who will you be teaming up with during the dungeon explorations? William finished chewing an apple before answering Drake's question. He had no intention of hiding his relationship with Est and the rest, so it was best to come clean to avoid future misunderstandings. The head prefect of the magic division begged me to form a party with them, William said in an arrogant manner. Since I am a refined, elegant, and charismatic person, it was hard for me to reject his offer. The students inside the dining hall pretended that they didn't hear the part about their head prefect being refined, elegant, and charismatic. They focused more on the part where the head prefect of the magic division begged William to form a party with them. A permanent party? Priscilla asked. How many members do you have? 5. William spread out the fingers in his left hand. Kenneth is included in my party as well. The students in the dining hall gave Kenneth sneaking glances that were filled with envy. To be personally added to the party of the head prefect means that William had already taken Kenneth under his wing. There were many students who wished they could swap places with Kenneth, but hurriedly tossed this idea to the side. They wanted to be like William. If a shepherd, who had spent his days tending sheep and goats, could become a head prefect, then they, too, could become officers using their own powers. After his speech, William had unknowingly become the idol of the commoners in the Royal Academy. They looked at him favorably because he was just like them. A common person who rose through the ranks due to his hard work. William was feeling smug because everyone was seriously listening to his every word. This had never happened to him before, and it was usually he who needed to listen to others in a serious manner. The shepherd enjoyed this moment of happiness, unaware that he would be caught inside the storm that was brewing inside the Royal Academy. Chapter 146, Don't Hold Back and Crush Them. 2 weeks had passed and William finally got used to his daily life in the academy. The lessons were very informative, especially the class that described the wild spirit beasts that roamed around the southern continent. William took these lessons seriously. He memorized the safe way on how to fight against these beasts as well as their weaknesses. Since he had no powers right now, knowing this kind of information would be beneficial for him. Today, Grant took the first years to the Colosseum in order to teach them the proper way to fight mages. All the first years lined up in a row, while Grant and Andy looked at them with serious expressions on their faces. Do any of you know how to effectively fight against mages? Andy asked. Spencer raised his hand and stepped forward. Sir, the best way to fight mages is to get close to them. Once you engage them in close combat, most mages will start to panic. Once that happens, it will be easy to neutralize them. Andy smiled. He didn't agree nor disagree with Spencer's answer. While it is indeed true that fighting mages in close combat will help you defeat them, this is not always the case, Andy answered. Only people who are confident with their close combat skills will be able to pull it off. Anyone else have an answer? Priscilla raised her hand and gave her opinion about the matter. The spells of mages have an effective range. Even if they cast powerful spells, they will disappear once they reach a certain distance. Andy smiled and nodded his head. A textbook answer, but only those who are proficient with their archery skills will be able to say these things. Is there anyone else who can give me an answer? Andy's gaze landed on William, who had his eyes closed while caressing the side of the Angarian goat beside him. William, what do you think? Andy asked. How can a martial fighter fight against a mage? William opened his eyes as he looked at Andy with a smile. The answer to this question is really simple, William replied. It will depend on certain conditions and the ability of the one who is fighting against the mage. There is no clear-cut answer on how to fight mages, but as martial fighters, you must consider everything, including the weather, the terrain, and even the mentality of your opponent. If you think that you have no chance of winning, then you should just run and escape. Wbnovels of Tez on nov/l/bi.com. William smirked and added a few more words. If you think that running away is shameful, you can just pay them back once you become a saint. By then, even archmages would have to think twice when fighting against you. Grant clapped his hands. Good answer. Physically, mages are at a disadvantage because they rely more on their magic power, compared to their physical prowess. However, don't forget, there are mages who are proficient in wielding weapons too. Magic swordsmen, bat-lemages, and the likes are good examples of magicians who can fight in close quarters with an expert fighter. In short, the one who is going to win is the one with more battle experience. Once you've become proficient in fighting mages, you will learn a few tricks on how to neutralize their strong offensive magical powers. Grant gave everyone an encouraging smile as he looked at the other side of the stadium. Today, we are having a joint class with the first-year Magic Division classes. This is a good opportunity for all of you to learn how to fight against mages, and they in turn, will learn how to fight against martial fighters. Make sure to open your eyes and learn from this experience. It is not every day that we can use terrain like the Colosseum to fight in a real battle against mages. Just as Grant finished his speech, the Magic Class Division, led by Est, entered the stadium. The haughty mages looked at the warriors of the martial class with arrogant expressions. Some of the students of the martial class frowned, but they didn't say anything and simply watched them from a distance. It had been a widely accepted rule that magicians would always be superior to those who didn't have the ability to wield magic. Today, you are going to learn how to fight against fighters, Layla explained. This is a joint class with the martial classes, so make sure to observe them carefully. Although they don't have magic powers, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are pushovers. Remember, a single arrow can end your life if you are not careful. Don't worry, Professor Layla, a handsome boy, who seemed to be a noble, said as he flicked his hair with confidence. As one of the generals of the Magic Division, I'll show you how to handle these small fries. I'll be looking at your performance then, Sir Edward, Layla said with a smile. However, her smile never reached her eyes. She was someone who hated arrogant nobles the most. You can count on me, Professor. Edward gazed at the martial class as if he was looking at a bunch of bugs that he could easily crush under his foot. Edward Yule Eric. Grade S talent in magic, and second son of Marquis Eric, Est thought. According to the information, he is the most promising among the first years when it comes to magic affinity. Est, Ian, and Isaac, only had grade A affinity to magic. Compared to them, Edward was a level higher and his family had gone all out to give him the necessary resources in order to pave the way for a future archmage. Let's see what you can do. Est smiled. He wanted to see just how capable his second-in-command was. Honestly, Est was hoping that the one who would get to fight Edward was William. Although the latter's power had been sealed, Est wanted to see just how much he had grown over the few years that they hadn't seen each other. A few minutes later, Grant, Layla, and Andy met at the center of the Colosseum and exchanged pleasantries. Looks like you're not having it easy, Layla, Grant teased. You're starting to look your age. You better apply your night cream before going to sleep. Layla sighed and nodded. These brats will be the death of me. I hope your students can bring them down a peg, so they will understand that they are not the center of the universe. Oi, you're supposed to side with your students, Andy reprimanded her. Are you sure you want your own class to suffer a loss? It might reflect badly on you as their teacher. Don't worry. Even if that really happens, so what? Layla replied. I can simply say, aren't you ashamed that you got beaten up by the same magicless warriors you ridicule every day? As long as I say that, everyone will shut their traps and just focus on their magic training. Grant and Andy shared a knowing glance and shook their heads helplessly. Layla was quite brutal to her students, but this was the right way to curb their arrogance while they were still young. Of course, they were also worried about their own students because magicians were not pushovers. Let's just make this a challenge match, Layla proposed. We will take turns in challenging each other. You guys can start first. Okay, Grant nodded. This sounds like a good plan. The three instructors returned to their respective divisions and explained the rules of the exchange of pointers. Both sides could choose to fight one-on-one, or in a group battle. Just like what happened when the martial class elected their vice prefect, the magic formation inside the Colosseum would prevent anyone from dying. With this assurance, both sides would be able to unleash their full power without worrying about their opponent's safety. We will be the first one to challenge them, Grant said with a serious expression. Who wants to take the first victory for our martial class? Me. No, I will do it. Step back, I'll handle this. Drake, Spencer, and Conrad were itching to teach the mages a lesson or two about fighting strong fighters like them. Everyone was getting heated up, and even Grant was starting to have a headache about who to choose. It was then that a lazy voice spoke out and gave out an order. Priscilla, you will fight first, William ordered. Don't hold back, and crush them. Since the head prefect had spoken, everyone reluctantly stepped back and stared at the beautiful girl carrying a bow behind her back. They had recognized Priscilla's strength during the vice prefect competition, so none of them thought that William's decision was out of place. Priscilla didn't say anything and stepped forward. She then looked at the magic class division and issued a challenge. My name is Priscilla Norell Grandfall, Priscilla declared. I am the vice prefect of the Solaris Martial Division. I would like to challenge the vice prefect of the magic division. Edward grinned when he saw the beautiful girl who had dared to challenge him. He then swaggered forward and gave Priscilla a smirk. I guess the martial class is not lacking in beautiful girls. Since you dared to challenge me, how about we make a little bet? If I win, you will become my subordinate. Don't worry, I will treat you really well. What do you say? Priscilla sneered as he gazed at the handsome blonde-haired boy in front of her. I don't mind. But, if I win, you will become my subordinate. What do you say? Huh? You've got guts. Edward grinned. Very well. I accept your condition. Let everyone here be a witness. After making his declaration, Edward took out a golden magic staff from his storage ring. It looked so cool and amazing that William was very tempted to touch it and see if he would be able to learn a new job class from it. Priscilla held the bow in her hand and gazed fearlessly at the arrogant boy in front of her. With a glance, everyone could tell that she was not the least bit nervous about the bet they had just made. William smirked when he saw this scene. Although Priscilla lost to him, he was sure that the girl still hadn't used all of her hidden aces during their battle. William and Est exchanged a glance and smiled at each other. This was not only a contest between their divisions. This was a fight between the two of them as well. Chapter 147, Might Over Magic Part 1. Edward appraised the beautiful girl in front of him from head to toe. He really liked Priscilla's beauty and the cold and fearless gaze that she was giving him. It made him want to defeat her, so that he could make her his subordinate. For some reason, there was something about her eyes that made him want to break her until she willingly knelt in front of him and declared her undying loyalty for his cause. He then gripped his staff and started to channel his magic power in preparation for their battle. Are both of you ready? Layla asked. Priscilla and Edward nodded their heads in unison. Very well, Layla nodded. Battle start. Edward immediately unleashed a storm of wind blades that headed towards Priscilla without mercy. The girl archer simply lowered her body and dashed to her left to evade the overwhelming attack. Edward sneered because he had already anticipated this move coming from her. He then activated the spell that he had prepared beforehand. Earth spikes protruded out of the ground and they appeared in the direction where Priscilla planned to make her escape. Dual element affinity. Not bad, Grant muttered as he watched the battle. At least he has the ability to back up his arrogance. Even Layla, who hated Edward's arrogant attitude, had to admit that he was a very talented mage. Earth and air? What a weird combination. Andy commented as he looked at the black-haired girl who seemed to be at a disadvantage. Even so, it is far from enough to defeat her. As Andy said these words, Priscilla stomped on the ground and jumped high into the air. She then fired 3 consecutive arrows that flew in an elegant arc towards the handsome boy, who still had a confident smile on his face. Edward waved his hand and a barrier made of wind surrounded him. He thought that it was enough to block Priscilla's futile attempt at a counterattack. The moment the arrows touched the barrier, they exploded into dazzling flashes of light that blinded Edward, which made him lose his concentration. This move. Spencer winced. How could he possibly forget the move that Priscilla used on him during the battle at the Colosseum? The string on Priscilla's bow glowed as she fired another arrow the moment she landed. Edward knew that he was at a disadvantage, so he immediately tapped the ground under him with his staff. A dome made of earth surrounded him. It was a powerful defensive spell that could fend off most attacks as long as they didn't exceed the caster's magic power. Priscilla's arrow connected with the earth dome and exploded. The arrow that the black-haired girl used was an exploding arrow that detonated upon impact. A small hole, the size of a basketball, appeared on the dome protecting Edward. Before the boy could cast another defensive spell, the sound of the wind whistling reached his ears. That was the last sound he heard before an arrow pierced his forehead and passed through to the other side of his head. Edward fell to the ground, dead, and turned into particles of light. The earth dome disappeared and the students of the martial class shouted and cheered for their vice prefect with all their might. Long live Priscilla! Long live our vice prefect! Edward reappeared on the side of the magic division with a dejected face. Everything happened so fast that he was unable to accept how easily he lost against a mere girl from the martial class division. Good job, William said as he gave Priscilla a thumbs up. Priscilla only nodded her head before she returned to her position behind the red-headed boy. The martial class students were looking at their warrior princess with admiration and respect. They knew that Priscilla was strong, but they didn't know that she was that strong. Est looked at Edward with a complicated expression on his face. The head prefect of the magic division class had wanted Edward to be taken down a peg due to his arrogance. However, when it actually happened, the only thing Est felt was bitterness. He had to admit that Edward represented the magic division class. His loss was the loss of the magic division as a whole. Young master, let me fight next. Ian stepped forward. I will definitely win this round. Who are you going to challenge? Est asked without looking back at his loyal retainer. The moment Ian spoke up, he already knew who Ian wanted to fight in the martial class. I'll fight William, Ian answered with a serious expression. Believe in me, young master. I can defeat him. Are you sure about that? This time, Est turned his head to look at Ian's eyes. How confident are you in defeating him? The seriousness in Est's eyes made Ian unconsciously take a step back. William's bickering buddy wanted to say that he had a 100% assurance that he could win the battle against William. But, he knew that this was not the case. William's strength lay in his unpredictability. Even Ian had to acknowledge that even if he used his full powers, he wouldn't be able to accomplish the things that William had done in the past. Ian couldn't possibly defeat a ruler of the forest, which was said to be, at the very least, in the middle tier of the grade B threat rankings. I will do my best. Ian gritted his teeth and answered. Est shook his head and faced the students of the magic division. It is now our turn to issue a challenge. Who among you wants to fight? I will fight. A girl with long blonde hair that reached down to her waist walked forward. She was one of the most beautiful girls among the first years in the magic division. Priscilla might be called as the warrior princess in the martial division class, but this beautiful blonde girl also held a title in the magic division. She was the steel princess that was said to be impregnable. Fight EDUFTS on NOV/E/LN.com. A/N, men of culture, please, behave yourselves. I will secure victory for our division, the beautiful girl stated. Est nodded his head. Do your best, Wendy. Don't worry, head prefect. Leave everything to me, Wendy declared, but everyone could see that her cheeks had flushed a beet red while she talked to Est. In order to prevent anyone from seeing her expression, she hurriedly walked towards the center of the Colosseum as she steadied her breathing. When she arrived at her destination, she had already regained her calm. Her eyes landed on the handsome boy in the martial class who was also staring back at her. Big brother, come, Wendy said as she summoned a spear in her hand. Show me how much you have improved after you ran away from home. Looks like it's my turn to fight. William raised his chin in an arrogant manner as he took a step forward to fight the beauty that was waiting at the center of the Colosseum. However, he was only able to take 5 steps when a hand grabbed the back of his robe and pulled him back. That is my little sister, Spencer commented. I am her twin and she is calling out to me, not you, head prefect. What? You are that beautiful girl's big brother. William eyed Spencer from head to toe. You don't look alike. Several students of the martial class also nodded their heads in agreement to William's words. Although Spencer was cool looking, the girl's beauty was at least 2 levels above him. I've been hearing that all my life. Spencer sighed as he stepped forward. Head prefect, I apologize in advance. William nodded his head in understanding. Don't worry. Do what you have to do. Thank you. Introduce me to your little sister later. No. Spencer stared at the face of his twin, whom he hadn't seen for half a year. It had been that long since he ran away from home because he wasn't able to tolerate the ridicule from his relatives. Since he couldn't fight them due to his father's position, he chose to run away in order to prevent both sides from having a confrontation. Have you been well, Wendy? Spencer asked. No, Wendy answered. You shouldn't have run away, big brother. It only made Uncle and Auntie more arrogant. Let them be arrogant. Spencer closed his eyes as if to push the negative thoughts to the back of his mind. That is the only thing they can do. They wouldn't dare to escalate things, or else they would not be able to handle the consequences. Even so, they still irritate me. Wendy gnashed her teeth in anger. The hands that were holding her spear were trembling due to the rage she was feeling in her heart. Since you already called me out, let's just fight. Spencer opened his eyes and summoned his own spear. Come show me if you have gotten stronger since the last time I saw you. Wendy's blue eyes turned light red as she circulated the magic power inside her body. The blade of her spear enlarged. Instead of a spear, Wendy seemed to be holding a giant curved dagger in her hands. Big brother, I will fight seriously. You'd better not hold back. Enough talk. Let's fight. Spencer spun the spear in his hand as he took a fighting stance. Both combatants stared at each other as they waited for Layla to declare the start of their battle. Are both of you ready? Layla asked. Yes, ready. Layla nodded and raised her hand. Battle start. Chapter 148, Might Over Magic Part 2. When Layla announced the start of the battle, the first thing that Spencer did was to take a few steps backwards. The students of the martial class didn't understand why he acted this way. However, they soon found out the reason for their representative's actions. Several 2-meter-tall steel spikes protruded in a straight line from the place where Spencer stood a while ago. Slaughter domain. Wendy shouted as she stabbed her spear towards the ground. Her magical power exploded and hundreds of steel spikes appeared all over the Colosseum. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the entire battleground was similar to the back of a porcupine that had all its quills standing up. Spencer found himself inside a steel forest with no path to advance nor retreat. This was not the first time that Wendy had used this move against him, but, back then, she didn't intend to hurt him. Now it was different. Fiendapt ovals on n/v/elbin.co/m. Spencer could feel the pent-up anger in his twin sister's words earlier and knew that she wanted to vent her frustrations on him. Even though Spencer was quite a capable fighter, he really couldn't find it in his heart to hurt his little sister. The cool-looking boy channeled his strength into his spear and spun it around him, creating a whirling storm. The steel around him was sliced off like bamboo poles as he advanced towards his sister, who was looking at him from the center of the Colosseum. Wendy jabbed the spear in her hand in her big brother's direction and the slaughter domain answered her call. The steel spikes shot out from the ground and rained down on Spencer like a hail of arrows. Spencer roared and spun his spear in front of him to deflect the incoming barrage. Tinkling sounds could be heard as Spencer's spear deflected the downpour of steel spikes that seemed to be unending. It was then that he heard a mighty roar as the steel that he had deflected flew up into the air to form a blade liger. She's really going all out, Spencer thought as he gritted his teeth. The blade liger roared once more before charging towards him with a vengeance. It was over 4 meters tall and each part of it was as deadly as Wendy's eyes, who were looking at him with the intention to kill. Good thing, I don't have a little sister. William gulped as he watched this scene unfold. Mama, our little Eve is a good girl, right? She won't do these kinds of things to me when she grows up, right? Me. Phew. I better send her some candies in our next package headed for Lant. Me. Spencer did his best to resist the attacks of the steel rain and the blade liger, but it was to no avail. Actually, it was not impossible to win the battle. However, he would have to force himself to kill his little sister. This was something that Spencer couldn't do even if there was an enchantment inside the Colosseum. Soon, the steel spears embedded themselves inside his body. Spencer did his best to protect his vitals as he fended off the persistent attack of the blade liger. William sighed as he closed his eyes. The cool-looking boy had already apologized to him. Spencer had no intention of winning the battle. His purpose in accepting the challenge was to endure his little sister's hatred and try to ease her heartache. Me. Ella bleated softly as if to tell William that the battle was over. Spencer's body turned into particles of light and the members of the magic division cheered for their victory. This leaves a bad aftertaste, Drake spat on the ground. Although he felt bitter, he had already seen the outcome of the battle when he saw Spencer's lonely back as he went to confront his little sister. That was the back of a man that had no intention of winning. It was not only him, Conrad and his lackeys had spent a lot of time with Spencer, Drake, and Priscilla during the past 2 weeks. Their relationship had grown a bit closer and, although they were still rivals, they had accepted each other as members of the martial class division. Head prefect, allow me to fight next, Drake said as he stepped forward. Go. William waved his hand. Show them the might of our martial class division. Drake grunted in affirmation as he took center stage. His eyes then locked on Est, who was standing in front of the magic class division. He wanted to challenge him, but he was afraid that William wanted to fight Est as well. As if sensing his hesitation, William called out from behind him. Challenge anyone you like, William ordered. Don't worry. Even if you lose, I am more than enough to secure our win. Drake silently thanked William inside his heart as he pointed his greatsword towards Est. I, Drake 6 Craig, challenge the head prefect of the magic class division, Drake shouted. Do you dare to accept my challenge? Est glanced at William, and the latter only gave him the thumbs up sign. Seeing that William had no intention of interfering in the challenge, Est nodded his head and walked forward to meet the one who challenged him. Go ahead, Prefect. Beat that ugly boy and show them the power of mages. Show them our superior might. The students of the magic class division cheered for their handsome head prefect. Although they didn't know who Drake was, they were sure that their head prefect wouldn't lose to a muscle-brained barbarian boy. Est gave Drake a brief nod of acknowledgement as he unsheathed Rhapsody, the sword that was given to him by the goddess Astrid. The sword rang the moment its body had been fully exposed, as if announcing its presence to the world. Est took a pose holding Rhapsody in his right hand, while holding the sheath in the other. With a glance, one could tell that he planned to fight using both of them at the same time. Dual wielding? Not bad. William grinned. I guess the battle against the Cyclops made you realize your shortcomings. This is gonna be good. William focused his attention on the battle that was about to take place. It had been 4 years since he last saw Est fight, and he was hoping that his first friend outside of Lant had grown stronger. There were only a few people that he could trust inside the academy, and Est was one of them. Chapter 149, This is why they are called heroes. Battle start. As Layla said those words, Drake charged forwards like a raging bull freed from its pen. The greatsword in his hand glistened in the sunlight as he closed the gap between him and his opponent. Est, on the other hand, didn't retreat. Instead, he also charged forward, which made the students of the Magic Division class cry out in alarm. The clash of steel reverberated inside the Colosseum as both sides collided. Est felt his hand go numb due to his opponent's superior strength. He knew that he would be at a disadvantage if he exchanged blows with Drake, but he didn't back down. His left hand, which was holding the sheath, slashed towards the side of Drake's body, forcing him to take a step back. After regaining his footing, Drake held his greatsword with both hands as he counterattacked with the intention to cleave Est apart. William raised an eyebrow when he noticed that Est was planning to trade blows with Drake in close combat. A humming sound reached everyone's ears as the sword in Est's hand started to glow. Est's unwavering gaze never left his opponent as the sword in his hand buzzed in anticipation. Rhapsody met Drake's full-powered strike, and the resounding clash created a shockwave that pushed both combatants away from each other. As soon as Est regained his footing, he lunged forward with his sheath right in front of him. Drake took a while to recover from the clash. A part of him couldn't accept that his full-powered attack was brushed off so easily, but he knew that he was fighting against a magic swordsman, so this was not surprising. I guess I have to get serious, Drake thought as he gripped the greatsword in his hand. Gathering his strength, a burst of red light exploded from his body. He then pressed a hand on the back of his sword before cleaving the space in front of him. Est's sixth sense screamed of danger as he hurriedly jumped to the side to dodge whatever invisible attack was headed his way. The ground beside him exploded, sending soil and grass flying in every direction. When the dust cleared up, a 6-meter crater appeared where Est stood a while ago. Est didn't bother to look at the scale of Drake's attack for an extended time, because his opponent was not finished yet. Drake waved the greatsword in his hands like a fly swatter. Est had to concentrate in order to avoid Drake's powerful attacks. He can't do this forever, Est thought as he used his superior speed and flexibility to avoid another invisible strike from the boy who seemed to be using all the strength in his body to maintain his barrage. Wow, what a scary kid, Layla praised as she eyed Drake with a smile. How old is he? How is he able to use the initial stages of sword aura and sword intent at such a young age? He's 16 this year, Grant answered. I believe that his master trained him in the mountains for 2 years, so he was late in enrolling at the academy. He didn't use this when fighting against Priscilla, William thought as he looked at the older boy who was hell-bent on winning against Est. I guess this is one of his trump cards. It seems that Spencer's loss angered him, and he's now going all out. Drake wasn't just attacking randomly. He was carefully observing Est's reactions as he continued his barrage of attacks. His sword aura only lasted for 3 minutes, so he was preparing to unleash his true strike at the perfect moment. Est gritted his teeth as he was forced to jump into the air to avoid Drake's latest strike since it gave him no room to maneuver. Seeing his opponent jump into the air, Drake prepared to unleash the coup de grace that would end their battle. Sky-shattering strike. Drake roared as he unleashed every bit of his strength into this final move. An image of a 5-meter red lion appeared in front of him and roared. It then changed into a ray of crimson light that shot towards Est, who was still in midair. Ironically, Est was also thinking of the same thing. When he jumped into the air, he was already in the process of unleashing one of his strongest blade skills. A golden aura surrounded Est's sword as he, too, used his sword aura. Rhapsody buzzed in his hand as if telling its owner that it was ready anytime. Your future rests on the orders of the divine, Est said firmly as the sword aura surrounding Rhapsody grew brighter. Lay down your life to these hands of mine. Divine burst. Est shouted as he thrust his sword forward. Rhapsody unleashed a blast of golden light that shot out from its tip. Get the latest chapters on n/felvin.com. The sky-shattering strike and the divine burst collided in midair. Both sword energies started to push against each other in a battle of supremacy between sword intents. Drake's feet skidded on the ground as he roared to empower his attack. Est, too, roared as his hair fluttered in the wind. William watched the battle with his arms crossed over his chest. He could tell that Est was very different from the boy he had met in the past. The red-headed boy understood the message that Est was trying to convey to him in this battle. 4 years ago, Est could only watch helplessly as William fought against the mountain troll. During the battle against the Cyclops, it was also William who made the ultimate sacrifice in order to help him clear the trial. Even though it didn't show in his face, deep down in his heart, Est hated himself for being weak. He hated himself for always being the one to be protected, while others suffered in his place. During the years that he hadn't seen William, he never stopped training. He did this, so that the next time he met William, he wouldn't have to depend on him to fight his battles. Est wanted to fight his own battles and use his own two hands to overcome any challenges that come his way. Break through it? Divine burst! Est shouted and the golden beam of light intensified. The sound of something breaking reverberated in the Colosseum as the sky-shattering strike shattered into particles of light. Est's divine burst swallowed Drake's body, and obliterated it completely. A mighty roar came from the Magic Division class as they looked at their head prefect with starstruck gazes. Est landed safely on the ground and used his sword and sheath to support his body. The cheers of the Magic Division reached his ears, but he didn't react to it. Instead, his gaze sought out the red-headed boy on the opposite side of the stadium. Happiness bubbled up in his chest when he saw William clapping his hands together while mouthing something. Est smiled. He was able to read William's lips, and it made him feel that all of his hard work had paid off. Following their head prefect, the students of the martial classes gave a round of applause to both fighters. Seeing the other side's reaction, the Magic Division decided to follow suit. They also applauded Drake's and Est's impressive performance. Even Grant, Layla, and Andy were clapping their hands together. Drake had already materialized beside William and the 16-year-old warrior sat on the grass with a dejected expression. "Can't you hear it?" William asked as he patted Drake's shoulder. "Everyone is applauding you for your performance. Why are you feeling down?" Drake didn't raise his head and simply answered, "Because I lost." "Yes, you lost," William answered. "Is this the first time that you've lost?" "No." "Then why are you acting like it's your first time?" William crossed his arms over his chest as he looked at the Magic Division class. "I've lost many times as well. However, that didn't stop me from moving forward. As long as you are alive, you will have plenty of opportunities to lose. You will have plenty of opportunities to learn from those losses. Did you know? The boy you fought earlier has also suffered losses in the past. However, despite those losses, he didn't stop moving forward." William started to walk towards the center of the arena. However, he stopped as if he had forgotten to tell his class something important. He then faced the students of the martial class who were looking at him with a serious expression. "No matter how strong the enemy is, a hero can't choose their opponent," William said in a firm manner. "This is why they are called heroes." Est, who was standing in front of the Magic Class Division, smiled when he heard William's words. He had said the same thing to him 4 years ago when they were facing off against the Cyclops in the Trial of Courage. The students of the martial class gazed at their head prefect who had resumed walking towards the center of the Colosseum with complicated expressions. Ella hesitated for a while before running towards her baby. William grinned when his mama appeared beside him. "You want to fight with me, Mama?" "Me. Okay," William said as he rested his hand on his mama's back. "Let's show them the power of Lant. Me." Chapter 150, Valuable Lessons. "I am the head prefect of the Martial Class Division," William announced. "I would like to fight a 2-on-2 battle with the Magic Class Division. Is there anyone who wants to accept my challenge?" Est turned his head to look at his two retainers. Ian and Isaac averted their gaze and pretended to look at the sky. The twins were not afraid to fight against William. What they were afraid of was fighting against Ella. They had seen her true form, and both knew that none of them could fight her even if they gave everything they got. They were Est's left and right-hand man, and they didn't want to lose in a bad manner in front of the Magic Division class. Est understood their concern. He also didn't want Ian and Isaac to fight against William because he felt that there was no chance of winning. The handsome brown-haired boy looked at the other members of the Magic Division who were raring to fight William and sighed inside his heart. "Ignorance is truly bliss," Est thought. "I wonder who I should send." While Est was deep in thought, 2 towering students stepped forward from the back of the Magic Division. They were the tallest and oldest members of the first years and none of the students dared to provoke them. "Head Prefect. Allow us the honor of winning this battle for our division," a sturdy teenager who was almost 2 meters tall said with a confident smile plastered on his face. "This will be a piece of cake. Isn't that right, bro?" "More like a piece of pie," a teenager replied with a smirk. "It's not every day we get to step on a head prefect's head. I'm sure that this will make the 2 of us famous." "Ha ha ha." Est used all his willpower not to roll his eyes at the 2 teenage twins who thought that they could easily beat William. The names of the twins were Brutus and Bruno. Both of them were 18 years old and only passed the enrollment test of the Royal Academy after failing repeatedly for 3 years. The minimum age to gain entry to the academy was 14 years old. Anyone who reached this age would be eligible to partake in the trials for enrollment. However, among the thousands of enrollees, only a few managed to pass through the gates of the Royal Academy each year. Those who failed their tests would come back again next year in order to try their luck. The academy had seen many such students, but they didn't care as long as they didn't exceed the maximum age limit of 18 years old. Priscilla and Spencer were 15, while Drake was 16. There were also a few 18-year-olds among the martial classes, so Brutus and Bruno's circumstances were not really that rare in the academy. Although they were older compared to their peers, the fact that they had managed to enroll at the academy proved that they had potential, even if they had to attempt to enroll consecutive times before succeeding. "Go." However, be careful, Est replied. The head prefect of the martial class is not a pushover. Don't worry, head prefect. Brutus smiled. My brother and I are very experienced in group battles. Have more faith in us. That's right. Bruno nodded his head. When this battle is over, the martial class won't be able to raise their heads in front of us again. The towering twins walked towards the center of the battlefield with arrogant expressions. What they didn't know was that Est, Ian, and Isaac had already lit incense for their corpses deep inside their hearts. Brutus and Bruno stopped walking when they were only 50 meters away from William. They then summoned their staves and declared their names. I am Brutus Mackazer. I am Bruno Mackazer. Together we are the Twin Towers of Kazer. Although the two of them only had average faces, they were by no means ugly. Their short grey hair and sharp features made them look charming in their own way. Both of them released a powerful presence that was quite common among mercenary groups. William clapped his hands in amusement as he looked at the two cannon fodders who were about to meet his mama's hoof and horns. Amazing? The two of you look so powerful. William praised. Are you perhaps the strongest in the magic division class? Brutus grinned and looked at the red-headed boy who was pleasing to his eyes. Well, I wouldn't say that we are the strongest. But, we are definitely in the top 10, Bruno finished his brother's sentence. He, too, grinned and eyed William. Boy, since we are older than you, allow me to give you some advice. What does the senior brother want to teach this humble shepherd? William inquired. He looked so refined, elegant, and charismatic, that even the arrogant twin brothers didn't want to humiliate him too much in front of the crowd. Admitting defeat at an earlier time is better than suffering from a beating, Bruno said with the I am a good person look on his face. I hope that Mr. Head Prefect will remember this during our battle. I thank senior brother Bruno for his advice, William nodded in acknowledgement. I will admit defeat when I think that there is no chance of winning. That is good, Brutus smirked. Let's have a friendly fight. Yes, let's. William agreed. The three people smiled at each other as if they were lifelong friends who were about to have a friendly spar. Ella, who was watching this banter from the side, felt her hoof itch. She was itching to kick the two teenage boys to Kingdom Come. Are all of you ready? Layla asked. She was quite amused by the pleasantries that both sides shared before starting their battle. Yes, me. Very well. Layla raised her hand. Battle start. Multiple stone bullets. Multiple fire bolts. Although they acted carefree and arrogant, Brutus and Bruno never underestimated William. The position of head prefect could not be bought by money or influence. It was a position that could only be obtained through a competition. Since William was the head prefect of the martial class, it meant that he had the ability to back it up. The twins didn't know his capabilities, so they decided to overwhelm him by using the magic combination that they had perfected over the years. No chapters will be fully updated at novl/bin.com. William started to run towards his right to evade the unbelievable display of magic and control from the twins whom he labeled as cannon fodders. If William still had his magic power, he would have been able to counter this attack. However, since it was sealed, he was forced to distance himself from the combined attack of his opponents. It was right at that moment when Ella made her move. Her hooves and horns glowed in a bluish hue as she charged towards Brutus like an arrow in flight. The twins had been paying attention to both William and Ella, so the moment she made her move, Brutus immediately constructed consecutive layers of earth walls to stop her advance. He thought that this was enough to block a little goat. It was the biggest mistake he made in his life. Ella broke each earth wall as if it was made of paper and continued her wild charge. Although she looked like a harmless goat right now, her stats were the same as her war ibex form. Even if she couldn't use her massive horns to inflict serious damage, her current horns were more than enough to demolish everything that the twins could throw at her. The jaws of the students of the martial class and the magic class dropped down in disbelief. Some of them even rubbed their eyes in an attempt to see if they were hallucinating. Me. When Ella tore down the last earth wall, Brutus immediately stabbed his staff forward. Boulder crash. A 2-meter-tall boulder appeared in front of Brutus and flew in Ella's direction. Ella stomped her front hooves on the ground and delivered a back kick towards the boulder. Just like a volleyball ball that was hit by a powerful spike, the boulder flew back to where it came from. Gwaya. Brutus didn't expect this sudden reversal and was hit squarely in the chest by the boulder he summoned. He flew a few meters backwards, but he didn't die from the impact. However, he wished that he had died because the excruciating pain in his chest was driving him mad. Several of his ribs had been broken, and it was very painful to breathe. Bruno roared and hurled several fire lances at the goat who was only a few meters away from him. Ella nimbly dodged this attack and charged in Bruno's direction. Due to desperation, Bruno spun his staff in front of him, which created a firestorm that engulfed the goat in searing flames. This was his strongest attack and he was saving this as his trump card. He never thought that he would be forced to use this against a little goat that he had treated as mere livestock. Me. Ella's mighty voice rang out within the firestorm. Bruno didn't know how it happened, but the moment he heard the goat's bleating, his whole body was blown away from where he stood. The firestorm disappeared, and the image of a white and fluffy goat appeared in front of everyone. Looking at her coat, that was still as white as snow, made everyone realize that the firestorm practically did nothing to her. While everyone was looking at her in disbelief, Ella opened her mouth and shot a ball of light, the size of a basketball ball, towards Bruno who had fallen on the ground. This was Ella's range skill benevolent shot. This was the move she had used earlier in order to counter the firestorm that was headed in her direction. Due to its holy properties, it prevented the flames from advancing towards Ella. The energy ball hit Bruno and immediately turned him into particles of light. Ella shot another benevolent shot. This time, it was aimed at Brutus. Just like what happened to his twin, Brutus turned into particles of light, which meant that the victors of this battle were none other than William and Ella. What a hard battle, William declared as he casually walked towards his mama Ella. Fortunately, my mama is very strong. Good job, mama. Me. William caressied his mama's neck as the latter closed her eyes in satisfaction. The members of the magic class and martial class didn't know how to react to the battle that just ended. The one who disposed of both combatants was Ella, while William only ran around to avoid getting hit. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that William didn't even lift a finger to help win the battle. Well then, who's next? William asked with an innocent smile. The battle ended before I was able to unleash my ultimate move. I feel unsatisfied with this result. Does anyone want to battle us again? Est, Ian, and Isaac's faces became stiff when they heard the shameless boy's provocation. They knew that Ella alone was sufficient to end the battle, so they didn't even bother to fight against her. However, William was forcing the students of the Magic Division into a second round. This was something that Est wouldn't allow because it would just lower his team's morale. Since the battle has ended, it is best to let the other students participate, Est replied. The head prefect of the martial class shouldn't hog the spotlight. That's right. Ian agreed. The head prefect should let his other members fight. It is bad to keep all the good stuff to yourself. William scratched his cheek because Est and Ian were adamant about preventing him from securing another easy win. Me. Okay, mama. I'll listen to you. Me. Ella had told William not to bully the kids, so William finally relented. The two walked back towards the martial class with calm expressions, as if the battle they had undertaken was not a big deal to them. This motivated the members of the martial class and made them perform their best against the magic class division. Although the martial class division suffered more losses during the next several matches, none of them took this loss to heart. William had already told them that he would personally train them the very next day in order to become stronger. Faced with this kind of promise, they were able to fight without any worries and even gave their opponents a headache. Out of the 30 battles that took place on that day, the martial class only won 10. Even so, the magic division didn't look down on them. They had experienced firsthand how difficult it was to fight against martial experts, and had learned a lot from the experience. Some of the girls from the magic division even snuck glances at William during the break between each battle. The shepherd smiled and waved at his admirers, which made the girls blush while giggling at each other. Overall, the battle had been an eye-opener for both sides. Due to this, Grant and Layla decided to hold more of these interdivision battles in order to let their students gain some fighting experience. The instructors hoped that these valuable lessons would help these students survive in the outside world, after they left the protective walls of the Hellan Royal Academy. Chapter 151, Planting Seeds. That exchange taught me a lot of things, Est said as he ate the sandwich that Ian and Isaac had prepared earlier. It taught me a lot as well, William commented as he picked up another sandwich from the basket that was in front of him. After the battle, Est invited William to join them for lunch. The shepherd happily accepted because free food was always a good thing. Est chose to have a picnic at one of the most scenic areas near the magic division, and William had to admit that the place Est chose was a good spot to have a picnic. Isaac and Ian were also eating by the side, but they only listened to the conversation. Surprisingly, Kenneth was there as well because William had dragged his roommate with him. Est didn't mind because the talk that they were going to have was about the dungeon exploration they would undertake tomorrow afternoon. Since Kenneth was one of the party members, Est thought that having him around would, also, be a good thing. Have you decided which dungeon to explore first? Kenneth asked. Est didn't reply. Instead, he looked at William as if telling Kenneth that the one calling the shots on the exploration would be him. Kenneth glanced at the red-headed boy who was happily eating the sandwich in his hand. Feeling his gaze, William decided to tell them where they would go in their first dungeon exploration. I want to go to the Goblin Crypt first, William said with a serious expression. Goblin Crypt? Est asked. Is there any particular reason why you want to go there? No, just simple curiosity. William lied. Based on the information that I read yesterday, the Goblin Crypt is a grade B dungeon. It has 30 floors and some say that it is one of the hardest dungeons for beginners. William was surprised when he saw the information on the Goblin Crypt that he found inside the Academy's archives. The Goblin Crypt that he could access from his Ring of Conquest only consisted of 20 floors and was a grade C dungeon. Obviously, there was some discrepancy between the two dungeons and William was very curious if the Goblin Crypt that he had been exploring all these years had a relationship with the one inside the Academy. According to the rumors I gathered, most first years can't get past the 14th floor, Est commented. It is said that many hobgoblin shamans, who specialize in dark magic, can be found on that floor. It is best that we only go as far as the 13th floor just to be safe. William nodded his head in understanding. His first fight against the hobgoblin shaman almost wiped out his entire herd. If not for James and Owen's timely assistance, William and his herd might have died on that fateful night. Good. Our goal for this exploration is to safely reach the 13th floor, William said with a serious expression. We will not challenge the hobgoblin shaman. Although that monster is in the lower tier of grade C, it is still a tricky monster to fight. Especially if you don't have any resistance to curses and dark magic. After finalizing their strategy, William and Kenneth returned to the martial class division. The fight against the magic division classes had made the students of the martial classes more motivated to train. This was good news for the instructors, and they happily opened the training ground to accommodate the feisty students. William was still a few meters away from the entrance of the training grounds, but he could already hear the clash of weapons against each other. It seems that the exchange of pointers woke them up from their daze, Kenneth commented. This is a good attitude to take, William replied. When William and Kenneth entered the training grounds, they saw all the students of the first-year martial class hard at work with their training. Grant was in a corner of the training ground, getting attacked by a dozen students. A big smile was plastered on his face as he calmly dodged and blocked the attacks that the children were raining down on him. William watched for a few minutes before nodding his head in appreciation. He then raised his voice to call everyone's attention. "Rally to me," William shouted. The students immediately stopped what they were doing and fell in line in front of William. Priscilla walked behind William before facing the other students, befitting her rank as vice prefect. "Your performance in the battle against the magic division class was good," William said as he looked at the students in front of him. "How was it? Is the magic division class strong? Follow Uist stories at nvl/by/n.com. Yes, indeed they are strong." William nodded his head. "However, that doesn't mean that they are undefeatable. The reason why the majority of you lost is because you have been lazy in your training. We need to fix this issue. That's why, starting tomorrow, all of you will wake up at 5 in the morning." William paused briefly in order to allow his words to sink in. "I am going to train all of you from the ground up. Everyone is going to train. There will be no exceptions. I'll make sure that during the interclass battles, our martial division will reign supreme. Anyone who doesn't want to participate will not be given breakfast and lunch. I don't need slackers in the Solaris dormitory. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, head prefect." "Good. Carry on with your training and I'll see you all tomorrow." "Sir." "Yes, sir." While William was giving out his orders in the martial class division, Carter was inside the training room of the third-year magic class division. "As you may already know, the most effective way to not get hit by a magic attack is to dodge it," Carter explained. "Of course, if you have strong magic powers, creating a barrier is also a good option. However, not everyone can do this. Each and every one of you have different magic affinities. Those who have low-grade affinities will not be able to block strong magical attacks. That's why you have to train yourself on how to dodge properly." Carter summoned his silver staff and gave everyone a sweet smile. "Today, we will start your defensive combat training. All of you will face me one by one. I will fire a single magic spell and it will be up to you whether to dodge it or block it. Those who perform well will receive a reward from me." The girls giggled as they looked at their handsome professor and readied themselves to give him a lasting impression. Just like Carter expected, not more than 30 people, out of 300 students, were capable of blocking his magic attack. Some of the foolhardy ones turned into particles of light after Carter's spell pierced through their defenses. Those with lower-grade magic affinities took his advice to heart and just focused on dodging. Carter praised these students as well, which made them quite happy. "I'm very impressed." Carter praised the entire class after the last student had returned to her position. "All of you have the makings of great mages." His flattery was happily accepted by everyone, which made the atmosphere very lively. Carter was someone who understood human nature and used the students' emotions to his advantage. "Now to give out the rewards I promised. To those that have performed well, I will give you 3 candies. Please line up and accept your rewards." The students made 2 lines, one for the boys and one for the girls. Carter personally handed his candies to everyone, which made him look like a fair and kind instructor. "Those who receive only 1 candy, don't feel bad about it," Carter announced. "Train harder and, in time, you will also receive more candy from me. However, a part of me wishes that all of you will not suddenly become experts on our next meeting." "Why?" "Because these candies are personally handmade by me. It takes time to make them and I will run out of stock if all of you suddenly become amazing mages. Please, have mercy on me." The students chuckled because Carter acted like he would suffer if all the candies he had on hand disappeared. After giving his final words of encouragement, Carter left the training grounds with a smile on his face. While it was true that he had worked hard to prepare those candies, he was also looking forward to the fruits that he would harvest in the future. The more the students ate the candies that he had prepared, the more their consciousness would be open to his suggestions. While it may not be as powerful as a charm spell, being able to manipulate them to do things that seemed natural to them was scarier. For now, Carter was willing to plant his seeds and wait until they were ripe for the picking. When that time came, the plan that he had in mind would also become a reality. Chapter 152, The Carrot and Stick Approach. William opened his eyes and lightly rubbed his Mama Ella's stomach before propping himself up into a sitting position. He raised his arms to do a little bit of stretching, while the goat beside him also raised her head. "Good morning, Mama." "Me." It was still dark outside, but William had already formed a habit of waking up early in order to do his morning training routine. However, this time, it was different. As the head prefect of the martial class division, he would lead the students into a rigorous training exercise that would help them build their foundations. He planned to use the same training that his grandpa James, and his mentors back in Lant, had used with him. William went to his closet and selected the sleeveless black training uniform that he had prepared beforehand. This was the same uniform that he had used during his training in Lant, and it was made from the pelt of the thunder-horned wolf that he had defeated ages ago. After putting on his clothes, William walked towards the opposite bed where his delicate roommate was still sleeping. Due to his half-elven bloodline, William was able to see in the dark. He could see Kenneth's cute, peaceful face in the darkness as he continued to sleep. "Wake up, Sleeping Beauty," William said as he lightly poked Kenneth's cheek. "Our training is going to start soon." Seeing that his roommate was not showing any reaction, William continued to poke the delicate face, which was as smooth as a girl's. He poked Kenneth's cheeks and nose until the sleeping boy opened his eyes in irritation. "Rise, my little sunshine," William teased. "Or do you need me to kiss you before you wake up completely?" "I'm not your sunshine and I don't need your kiss," Kenneth replied as he grabbed William's annoying finger and pushed it away. "Wait for me outside the dormitory. I'll wash my face first." "Okay." William smiled as he walked toward the door. Ella followed behind William as they left the room together. The entire dormitory was quiet, and it seemed that most of the students were still in their beds, dreaming of when they would stand at the peak of the mortal realm. William felt mischievous and placed his hand over the emblem pinned on the right side of his training uniform. Immediately, blaring sounds erupted throughout the Solaris dormitory. The noise instantly woke most of the sleeping students. Some of them came out of their rooms to see what was happening, with their weapons ready. "Wake up, Sleeping Beauties! The time to train has arrived." William's domineering voice reverberated inside the Solaris dormitory. "Of course, if you want to stay as beautiful princesses, you can ignore this announcement. Those who want to become strong and increase their ranks, I'll meet you at the gates of the Solaris dormitory. I'll give all of you 10 minutes to prepare. See you outside." After making his announcement, William made his way towards the dormitory gates. He didn't know how many people were planning to participate in the morning training, but he hoped that more than half of the first years would come. 10 minutes later, a bunch of annoyed, drowsy, and excited students could be seen lining up behind William. The guards, who were manning the gates, looked at this scene with interest. This was the first time they saw such a scene and they were wondering what was going on. "Okay, all of you follow my movements," William shouted. "We will be doing basic stretching exercises first. After that, all of us will run towards that golden flag fluttering in the distance." Some of the students groaned when they saw what William was pointing at. The huge flag fluttering in the distance was the flag that marked the boundary of the martial class division. According to their estimate, it was at least 5 to 6 miles away from the gates of the Solaris dormitory. Only those who had been training for a long time didn't make any unnecessary comments and began to follow William as he did his stretching routine. After 5 minutes of stretching, William faced all the students and smiled. "The first one to reach the flag will become a temporary officer. If that person continues to follow my training regimen until this month is over, he will become a permanent officer of the martial class division. Cheating is not allowed. You are only allowed to use your own physical powers. Using artifacts, weapons, or accessories to boost your body's performance is not allowed. Anyone caught doing this will not be tolerated, and will be forever banned from getting an official post. If you want to become an officer, use your own 2 hands and feet to seize it." William's words broke everyone out of their daze. Those who were still half asleep suddenly became awake, while those who were grumbling earlier looked at the flag in the distance as if they wanted to eat it whole. The red-headed boy chuckled internally as he saw their serious expressions. The carrot and stick approach is really effective. William stood straight in front of everyone and raised his chin. "Are all of you ready?" "Yes." "Very well. On my mark," William said as he raised his hand. "Ready, get set, go." The first years started to run earnestly. They didn't hinder each other's path and ran at their own pace. William ran behind the group to ensure that no one would slack off. Although running 5 to 6 miles may seem like a long journey, for martial warriors, it could easily be accomplished in less than an hour. All the first years that had passed the entrance test of the Royal Academy were all talented individuals. Although they may not be as strong as Priscilla, Spencer, Drake, and Conrad, they were not far behind when it came to martial prowess. Just like William expected, the entire student body reached the border area in less than an hour. While all of them were panting for breath, and their sweat oozed out of their bodies, they looked at him with determined expressions. Surprisingly, the first one to reach the goal was a chubby boy with dark brown hair. William had ordered the system to memorize the faces and names of everyone that he had met. After a little bit of digging, William was finally able to recognize the boy who was looking at him with anticipation and excitement. "Dave Cornwell, step forward," William ordered. "Sir." Dave replied as he stood in front of William. "You did well." William patted the boy's shoulder. "From now on, you will be our temporary logistic officer. You will be in charge of gathering the things that we will need for our daily exercise routines, as well as the supplies needed for the missions that our class will undertake." William smiled as he personally pinned a silver emblem on Dave's uniform. "I will allow you to pick 6 people to help you accomplish this important task for our martial class division. Do not let me down." "Thank you, Head Prefect," Dave replied with a teary expression. "I will do my best." "I know." William once again patted Dave's shoulder before facing the rest of the students who were looking at Dave with envious faces. "Our training is not yet over," William said with a smirk. He then pointed at the boxes that were piled up beside the tree where the flag was enshrined. "Open the boxes and pick 4 metallic bracelets each. Wear them on your wrists and on your ankles. Starting today, you are not allowed to remove them. Each bracelet weighed 22 pounds each, 10 kilos. The martial students were familiar with this training method, so none of them complained. What they didn't know, however, was that these were enchanted bracelets. The bracelets would automatically increase their weight, depending on the one who wore them. If they were worn by someone like Drake, instead of 22 pounds, they would weigh 44 pounds. That would mean that the boy would be carrying that much weight on both his wrist and ankles. William had pestered Grant and Andy to have these bracelets prepared so they could be part of the first year's training. The two instructors happily accepted William's request and went to the Martial Division's storage to personally handle this undertaking. Training bracelets were very common in the Royal Academy. Even mages used them in order to build their physical foundations. William wouldn't wear any of the bracelets that were prepared by the Academy. He was already wearing his own that were personally forged by the blacksmith of Lant, Barbados, to help with his training. The blacksmith's best friend, Seraphi, the jeweler of Lant, helped inscribe the runes on William's bracelet, doubling their effectiveness. In the 4 years that William had trained in Lant, the black bracelets on his wrists and ankles had already passed 100 pounds each, 40 kilos. As William got stronger, the weight of his bracelets also increased. When he started, William had a hard time adjusting to the weight, but as time went on, he got used to it and treated the bracelets as accessories instead of shackles that limited his movement. Fiend up TED ovals on n/v/elbin.co/m. Of course, William's bracelets were not ordinary bracelets. They had a special enchantment that allowed them to transform into bracers, arm guard, giving added protection to William's body. William eyed everyone with a serious expression. When all of them had secured the bracelets around their wrists and ankles, the red-headed boy gave the order to jog back to the Solaris dormitory. He wanted their training to be a gradual strengthening instead of an intensive one that would leave the students paralyzed and unable to go to their respective classes. William wanted to increase their stamina first. Once he deemed that everyone was ready, he would increase the intensity of their training accordingly. He was confident that the students of the martial classes would be able to surprise the other two divisions in the interdivision class battles in 3 months' time. Chapter 153, The Town of Hartlepool. Since William was planning to head to the Goblin Crypt within the Royal Academy, he ordered Priscilla and Dave to take charge of the morning training routine. For now, William wanted everyone to build their stamina, so running in the morning was the most effective way to do it. As for their physical training, that would be taken care of by Grant and Andy during their martial training lessons. After relaying his orders, William, along with Kenneth, went to the meeting spot where Est, Ian, and Isaac were waiting. The Goblin Crypt and the other dungeons were not located inside the Academy. They were actually located in different parts of the Hellan Kingdom. In order to get to their destination, they would have to use the Academy's exclusive teleport gates that were powered by magic crystals. Each trip cost 5 gold coins per person. Naturally, the farther the place was, the more expensive it would be. This was why most commoner students preferred to take commissions from the Academy instead of going to the dungeons to hunt monsters for their cores and materials. Only the children of nobility or well-off merchants were able to use these teleport gates at their leisure. Are both of you ready to depart? Est asked as soon as William and Kenneth arrived at their meeting place. I'm as ready as I'll ever be, William replied. Me. Kenneth just nodded his head to say that he was ready to go anytime. Good, Est smiled. Let's go. I've already asked around and found the teleport gate that we will be using. Est led the way and the rest followed behind him. Less than 5 minutes later, they arrived at a gate where over a dozen students stood in place. William saw a few familiar faces among the group of people who also wanted to challenge the Goblin Crypt. Spencer, along with his twin sister, Wendy, were there. The 2 boys whom William and Ella had faced in the battle were there as well. Fancy meeting you here, Brutus greeted with a smile. This must be fate at work. Bruno stretched out his hand for a handshake. Nice to see you again, William. William happily shook Bruno's hand and returned the greeting. Senior, are you going to the Goblin Crypt as well? Although William defeated the 2 of them, the twin brothers didn't take it to heart. They were even quite impressed by the harmless-looking goat that always stayed by William's side. Never in their wildest dreams did they think that they would be defeated by an Angarian goat that could be seen anywhere in the Hellan Kingdom. Yes, Bruno replied. Little Wendy asked us to accompany her in the dungeon exploration. The Siskin decided to tag along because he doesn't trust the 2 of us to protect his sister. William gave a sidelong glance at the Siskin who was standing beside Wendy. Spencer snorted at William's inquiring gaze, but didn't say anything. Up to what floor are you guys planning to explore? William inquired. I heard that the 14th floor is a dangerous place because it is the floor where the goblin shaman spawns. Bruno grinned and used his thumb to point at Wendy. It seemed that the blonde beauty was the leader of the group, and the decision-making lay in her hands. We're planning to challenge the 14th floor, Wendy admitted. However, we will immediately run away if it gets too dangerous. William frowned, but he didn't say anything. It was not up to him to tell them what to do because they were not part of his division. Even so, he still kindly reminded Wendy and her party to be extra careful when dealing with the hobgoblin shaman. I hope they can handle it, William thought. While William was reminiscing about his first battle with the hobgoblin shaman, the teleport gate glowed and several students appeared in the area around it. They were the students that had finished their dungeon exploration. Some of them had smiles on their faces, while others had pale expressions. It seemed that not everyone was able to leave unscathed from their dungeon expedition. After the last student had left the teleport area, the one managing the gates raised his hand. Those who are traveling to the town of Hartlepool, please, stand beside the teleport gates, the staff announced. We will be sending you to your destination in 5 minutes. William's and Wendy's group, along with others, stood beside the gate and waited for their turn. Hartlepool was the small town that was built around the Goblin Crypt. In most cases, dungeons were discovered by humans by accident. When a dungeon was found, they would either keep it for themselves, or report their discovery to the kingdom. Both held advantages and disadvantages. Those who didn't report the dungeons they had discovered would gain a monopoly of monster materials, beast cores, and other items that could be found inside the dungeon like chests and treasures. When seen from an angle, this was a very lucrative business, at least for the short term. However, once this dungeon was discovered by others, fighting would usually ensue between the different parties. The worst-case scenario was when the noble who had jurisdiction over the territory discovered the location of the dungeon, they would immediately send a message to the ruling family in order to give them the rights to manage the dungeon in their domain. Of course, once this happened, all the benefits that the discoverers had gained for the short term would disappear completely. If they were the ones who reported the dungeon to the kingdom, they would be given an honorary title, and the deed of the land surrounding the dungeon. This means that they would become the rightful owner of the area and the ruling noble couldn't do anything about it. This was to ensure that newly discovered dungeons would immediately fall under the kingdom's jurisdiction and be developed accordingly. Everyone get ready, the staff announced. We will be activating the teleport gate. William felt lightheaded as his vision turned completely white. This feeling only lasted for a brief moment before he found himself in an enclosed area surrounded by a tall wall. Several soldiers could be seen on top of the ramparts, and a big steel gate served as the only point of entry and exit towards the teleport gate. As William scanned his surroundings, a tall man wearing armor with the Royal Academy's insignia on it greeted them. Welcome to Hartlepool, the guard captain, who was guarding the teleport gate, said with a brief nod. As students of the Royal Academy, I expect that all of you will follow the rules of Hartlepool and not get into fights with the locals. With that said, any crimes that you commit during your stay will be written in the Academy records. I wish all of you the best on your dungeon exploration. After finishing his speech, the guard captain made a gesture and the steel gate opened. The students made a beeline towards the exit and a bustling town appeared in their sight. Should we reserve a room at an inn or do you want to just jump to exploring the dungeon? Est asked. Let's just go to the dungeon, William replied. We didn't come here to sightsee, so let's get down to business. William looked calm on the surface, but he was actually really itching to go to the Goblin Crypt as soon as possible. He wanted to see if it was the same dungeon that he could access with his Ring of Conquest. Surprisingly, Wendy shared his opinion and proposed that they all go to the dungeon together. This is our first time arriving in this town. It will be best if we all stick together, Wendy said with a smile. Head Prefect Est and Head Prefect William look so dreamy. If possible, I want to form a closer connection with the two of them. Spencer frowned because he could vaguely sense what his sister was thinking. He was the overprotective type. If possible, he didn't want anyone to approach his sister during her stay at the Royal Academy. Sounds like a good idea, William answered. What do you think, Est? I don't mind. Est nodded. Wendy's smile widened when her two idols gave a positive reply. She even took the initiative to grab hold of William's and Est's hands and slightly pulled them to leave the gate together. William was amused by Wendy's actions and played along. Est, however, didn't expect this move from Wendy. He wanted to pull away, but decided to just go with the flow for now. Follow Uist stories at nvl/by/n.com. It wouldn't hurt to get along with Wendy since she's part of the magic division, Est thought as he gave William a sidelong glance. The shepherd returned his gaze and even teasingly winked back at him. Clearly, he enjoyed seeing Spencer's irritated expression as the latter's twin pulled him through the town of Hartlepool. Ella walked beside William, while Kenneth, Ian, and Isaac followed behind them. Brutus and Bruno shrugged their shoulders as they followed the group, leaving the frowning Spencer behind them. Wendy has lived a sheltered life and this is her first time interacting with people outside our duchy, Spencer thought. Although William seems like a good person, I still don't want him to act chummy with my little sister. I better keep an eye on him to ensure that he won't have any weird thoughts about Wendy. The Siskin felt that it was only right and proper to protect his little sister from shady characters like William. As for Est, although Spencer didn't know who he was, he had a more favorable opinion to Est compared to the red-headed boy who was shrouded in mystery. Chapter 154, Goblin Crypt Part 1. So this is the Goblin Crypt, William muttered as he looked at the entrance of a big cave. He also noticed the sign hanging near the entrance that had the information of the dungeon. Dungeon name, Goblin Crypt. Grade level, B. Number of floors, 30. Overall assessment, a dungeon where only goblin-type monster spawns. It is highly recommended to explore it with a party of 6 starting from the 14th floor onwards. They even highlighted the 14th floor. How considerate, Est said as he read the information near the entrance of the cave. Will, are you sure you don't want to challenge the 14th floor? If possible, I don't want to challenge it, William replied as he gazed at Wendy. Hobgoblin shamans shouldn't be underestimated. I hope you reconsider your plan to challenge them. It's fine, Wendy stuttered. I have my big brother, as well as Senior Brutus and Senior Bruno with me. I am also strong, so I think we can handle it. William nodded his head in understanding. Even so, he sighed internally. He was just like her in the past. Naive, and thought that everything would go his way because his mama Ella was strong. System, place a tracker on Spencer and Wendy. 4 God points will be consumed. Are you sure of your decision? Yes. Please. Understood. Trackers had been successfully placed. Spencer Armstrong's and Wendy Armstrong's location and health conditions will be monitored for 48 hours. Thank you. The tracker tool of the system allowed William to put a special mark on anyone. This allowed him to know their general location as well as their current health condition. The maximum number of trackers that William could deploy at any given time was 10, and it consumed 2 God points per beast or person. It was one of the special functions of the system that was unlocked when William had acquired the Cavalier Job class. It was a function meant to mark wild monsters that could be hunted down and tamed to become a mount for the Cavalier class. Ironically, the system made the mark universal and allowed William to use it on people as well. I guess this is where we part ways, Est commented. Wendy, Brutus, Bruno, take care. Remember, your lives are important. Don't take unnecessary risks. Yes, head prefect. The 3 replied in unison. William patted Spencer's shoulder. Keep your sister safe. If she gets hurt, I will give you a punishment. I'll do that even if you don't tell me to, head prefect, Spencer replied grumpily. You should worry about yourself. I've heard that there are certain adventurers who go out of their way to harass new faces that they see in the dungeon. Spencer glanced at William's slave collar and put on a serious expression. Everyone should be careful. There are instances where adventurers are captured and sold as slaves. Although the Goblin Crypt is under the jurisdiction of the Hellan Kingdom, there are still scumbags that are always on the lookout for pretty girls and boys that will fetch a high price in the black market. That's very good advice, William smiled. So, make sure to protect your sister as well. William unconsciously caressed the slave collar on his neck while staring at the entrance of the dungeon. Wendy's, Brutus, and Bruno's expressions changed when they realized that the collar on William's neck was a slave collar. They initially thought that it was just an accessory, but Spencer's words made them give it a second look. Feeling their gazes, William smiled wryly. I can guarantee that being a slave is not a fun experience. That is why, all of you should be more careful, especially you, Wendy. Someone as beautiful as you will definitely be sold for a high price. I'd like to see them try, Wendy said in a tone laced with anger. Head prefect, if you want, I can buy your freedom for you. Wendy looked at William with genuine concern, which made William feel warm inside. You don't have to worry about me, William replied. He decided to change the topic by pointing at a store that was not far away from the entrance of the cave. Let's buy some maps first. It will be a good idea to have a general outline of the dungeon that you are going to explore. William didn't wait for any kind of reply and walked towards the store at a steady pace. He wanted to tell them that he had already regained his freedom, but decided not to say anything. The reason why William kept the collar on his neck was to remind himself that slavery existed in this world. Also, the collar doubled as a means of protection. Since he was already wearing a collar, it meant that he had an owner. Human traffickers would no longer attempt to enslave him because a slave collar could only be removed by their owners. Unless the owner of the slave died, the enslavement spell would remain in effect. There were powerful slave traders that are on par with the experts of Lant. William had no chance of winning against them if he met them on his journey, so having the collar on his neck added a layer of protection. Aside from elves and beastkin, half-elves were always high in demand in the auctions on the black market. With William's looks, he would be a very attractive target for the slave traders who were looking for some new goods to sell. Visit novelbin.cm for updates. When William arrived at the store, he immediately bought all the floor maps that were available. This cost William 10 gold coins, but he didn't care. He was more curious about the differences between the maps in his hands and the maps that were recorded in his system. System, scan the maps and tell me your initial findings. Understood. Scanning the floor maps of the Goblin Crypt. Scanning successful. Host, the floor map of the Goblin Crypt that can be accessed through the Ring of Conquest is slightly different from the map that we have just recently obtained. Slightly different. Yes. I will show you the difference between the two dungeons. 2 maps of the first floor appeared inside William's status screen. On the left side was the Goblin Crypt that he could access from the Ring of Conquest. On the right was the map that William had just bought from the store. Wait, this is... Yes. The floor layout of the first floor of this dungeon is bigger than the one that we can access from the Ring of Conquest. To put it simply, it's like an expansion. Although there are similarities between the 2 maps, some changes were made and the Goblin Crypt in this area is 2 times bigger than the one we can access with the ring. Tell me your thoughts about the matter. Host. Perhaps our version of the Goblin Crypt is the version of the dungeon when it was still young. According to the data that I have gathered from this world, all dungeons can grow and expand. It is very possible that the Goblin Crypt that we have is a recorded copy when it was newly discovered. William stood in a daze as he looked at the map inside his status screen. His group had already arrived by his side and taken a peek at the maps that were in his hands. They thought that the red-headed boy was just taking a close inspection of the map before they entered the dungeon. William, is there a problem with the maps? Est inquired. William had been staring at the map for too long that he thought it was strange. No, there is no problem, William answered as he gave the maps to Est. Carry it with you. I have already memorized it so I don't need it anymore. Then I will gladly accept your generosity. Est inspected the maps one by one and tried to memorize them. Spencer didn't want to waste any more time and decided to buy maps for their own party as well. Wendy could see the impatience on her big brother's face, so she decided to reluctantly bid her goodbyes to her two idols. William watched Wendy's retreating back as she entered the cave along with her party. She is a good girl, William said as he crossed his arms over his chest. Yes, she is a good girl, so stay away from her. Ian scoffed. What's wrong? Are you jealous? William gave Ian a teasing glance. I'm just worried that Wendy will bite off more than she can chew. You don't need to worry about her, Kenneth commented from the side. Spencer, Brutus, and Bruno are strong. She'll be safe as long as she doesn't go to the lower floors or meet some strong adventurers along the way. Besides, she's wearing the uniform of the Hellan Royal Academy. Even if the bad guys had guts, they would still need to think twice before making a move on her. After Kenneth finished his explanation, Est looked up and cleared his throat. I've memorized the maps from floor 1 up to floor 14. Since we are only planning to go as far as floor 13, I think this is enough for the time being. William nodded his head in agreement. Lead the way, party leader. Okay. Est smiled as he walked towards the entrance of the cave. William had passed the leadership role to Est because his only intention was to see the differences between his version of the goblin crypt and the dungeon in front of him. After walking deeper into the cave, William and his party met many parties who were busy killing goblins on the first floor. The goblins here are more numerous compared to my version of this dungeon, William thought as he scanned his surroundings. The system is right, this place is indeed bigger. As they walked towards the second floor, William noticed a single goblin standing in the distance. He immediately summoned his bow and quiver before pulling an arrow out from behind his back and taking aim. The goblin wasn't even able to cry out in pain as its body fell to the ground. A few seconds later, it turned into particles of light, leaving a single ear on the place where it died. William's eyes widened when he saw the notification that appeared on his status screen after killing the goblin. EXP gained, 12. Chapter 155, Goblin Crypt Part 2. That was a good shot, Est praised. Why do you look so happy? Because it is more than 10, William, as the smile on his face widened. More than 10? What do you mean? You won't understand. How could he possibly tell his friends that over the past 4 years the highest experience points he gained from killing a monster was 10? Those 10 points could only be achieved by killing a goblin shaman, which was ranked between D and C. Depending on the skills it had learned, a goblin shaman could be at the peak of the D tier, or in the initial stages of rank C. Ella in her war ibex form could be classified as a level C, low, threat. The goblin shaman's threat level started at level D, high, and ended at level C, mid. Meaning, it was a threat that could potentially kill people who are unaware of its true strength. Since William, Ella, and the goats had trained to resist curses and dark magic, a goblin shaman was something that they could handle. Even so, after killing this dangerous creature, the amount of experience points that William gained would not surpass the number 10. That's why he became very emotional when an ordinary goblin gave him 12 experience points. System, did you notice? Yes. The experience points gained inside this dungeon and the one we can access through the Ring of Conquest have almost the same value. Although the experience here is a little lower, the difference is not that far apart. William agreed with the system's observation. Right now, there were 6 members in their party. William, Ella, Est, Kenneth, Ian, and Isaac. The experience points were split among the group, so the red-headed boy only received 12 experience points after killing 1 goblin. System, set the EXP allocation to the Shepherd job class, William ordered. It would be best if we max it out as soon as possible. Understood. Experience points allocation is successfully transferred to the Shepherd job class. Thank you, William sighed. He had long wanted to max out his main job class, but circumstances had prevented him from doing so. Shepherd LVL 28. Current job EXP, 42,400/91,207. Are you really okay? Kenneth inquired. Should we return when you're feeling better? I'm fine, William said as he wiped away the last tear stain on his face. Sorry, you saw a weird side of me just now. Let's continue our exploration. Est was still worried about William, but since the latter had said that he was fine, then he decided to continue their dungeon expedition. Our goal is to get to the 10th floor as soon as possible, Est explained. We will only kill the goblins along the way. Be wary of human parties that look suspicious. If any of you feel that something is wrong, feel free to give a warning. Everyone nodded their heads in agreement. Just like Spencer said, inside dungeons, it was not only the monsters that you needed to worry about. You also needed to protect your backs against humans. The progress of their group was quite smooth. They didn't meet that many goblins, and the parties they met along the way steered clear of them. After 3 hours inside the dungeon, they finally arrived at a bronze gate that marked the end of the 10th floor. According to the map, the first boss of this dungeon is the Hobgoblin leader, Est said with a serious expression. Its threat level is D, mid. It also summons 2 Hobgoblin warriors, and 2 Hobgoblin archers. Their threat level is D, low. William, Kenneth, I will let you deal with the archers. Ian, Isaac, you will deal with the Hobgoblin warriors. I will handle the leader. Understood. Me. The moment William's entire party entered the door, the bronze gate closed behind them. William had experienced this many times before, so he wasn't worried. Est, Ian, and Isaac, on the other hand, were looking around anxiously. Just like in William's memories, the boss room was similar to a coliseum. Torches lit up the sides, casting their eerie glow on the challengers. Suddenly, a mighty shout sounded at the far end of the Colosseum and a hobgoblin jumped down from who knows where and landed in the middle of the battleground. William raised an eyebrow, because the hobgoblin leader that appeared was very different from the one he had battled inside his version of the goblin crypt. The hobgoblin leader that was standing in front of them was 2 meters tall. It held a sword in each hand. It was also wearing lightweight metal armor on its body, and the presence it revealed was that of a veteran fighter. 4 hobgoblins appeared beside it. 2 archers, and 2 warriors. Their threat level was leagues apart when compared to the boss fight that William had fought inside his version of the Goblin Crypt, many years ago. System, it seems that your guess was right. Yes. The monsters inside this dungeon are stronger compared to the ones that are available in our version of the Goblin Crypt. Dungeon growth, William mused before using his appraisal skill. Hobgoblin leader. Goblin race. Threat level, D, high. Cannot be added to the herd. After countless evolutions, the Goblin race has finally given birth to a leader. The Hobgoblin is born from the Goblin race's desire to grow stronger. A Hobgoblin leader is born to lead the Hobgoblins to battle. If the Hobgoblin leader is already this strong, then it is safe to assume that the Goblin Shaman is already at rank C. William frowned. The system had kindly reminded William that the threat level of the Hobgoblin Shaman would always be a level higher than the Hobgoblin leader. Not only that, since the dungeon's monster composition had changed, it was very possible that on the 14th floor, the Hobgoblin leader and Hobgoblin Shaman might be in the same group. If this was true, then they would really be fighting a strong team of monsters once they stepped onto the 14th floor. I'm worried about Wendy. How about Spencer, Brutus, and Bruno? Are you not worried about them? They're boys, why should I worry about them? William stood in place holding his bow and arrow. Est, Ian, Isaac, Kenneth, and Ella had charged towards their respective foes and engaged them in combat. William didn't intend to participate in this battle. His mama Ella was more than enough to dispatch the Hobgoblin archer with ease. He was paying close attention to his friends' battles and would help them if needed. Kenneth's quick movements allowed him to close the gap between himself and the Hobgoblin archer in order to engage it in close combat. Surprisingly, the Hobgoblin archer used a short sword to parry Kenneth's attack. Ian and Isaac were battling hard against the 2 Hobgoblin warriors who were equipped with both swords and round shields. The Hobgoblin's threat level was D, mid, just a level lower than the Hobgoblin leader, and they were fighting against Ian and Isaac evenly. It seems that the twins weren't being serious in the battle because they didn't use their magic powers. They were only using their sword techniques as if they were using the Hobgoblins as training partners. Est was fighting a dual-wield battle with the Hobgoblin leader and, just like his retainers, he wasn't using his magic powers either. The only problem was, Est was getting pushed back by his enemy. Even so, Est didn't back down and continued to engage the Hobgoblin leader in close combat. The sound of weapons clashing reverberated inside the boss room as both parties fought for supremacy. 5 minutes later, the twins felt that they had endured enough and used their magic powers to make a comeback. Ian's sword extended and lashed out at his opponent like a whip. The blade turned into a whip made up of water and sent the Hobgoblin skidding away a few meters. Whip sword. Wow. William praised the snot-nosed pansy behind his back. That looked so cool. Isaac on the other hand summoned a round shield made up of hard rock that was 1.5 meters tall. He then charged against his foe using the shield to ram the Hobgoblin's body. A miserable shriek escaped the Hobgoblin warrior's lips as it was sent flying. William winced upon seeing this scene and wondered how he would fare if he got hit in the face by Isaac's shield. The thought of it made him shiver, so he immediately looked in another direction. Est gritted his teeth and Rhapsody glowed brighter. Divine Burst. Est unleashed a special move at point-blank shot which caught the Hobgoblin leader by surprise. With a shout of unwillingness, the Hobgoblin leader tried to use its swords to block Est's attack, but it was futile. The power of the Divine Burst overwhelmed the defenses of the Hobgoblin leader and tore through its body. Est looked at the gaping hole that appeared in his opponent's chest before it lifelessly fell to the ground. Soon, its subordinates followed its demise as they were finished off by William's party. Ella had long defeated her opponent, and simply watched the children as they fought against their respective opponents. She understood that they were training themselves with real combat, so she didn't help them after her fight had ended. Follow Uist stories at nvl/by/n.com. The Hobgoblin leader and his lackeys disappeared into particles of light, marking the end of the boss fight. EXP gained, 5,000. Shepherd LVL 28. Current job EXP, 47,400/91,207. William grinned when he saw the influx of experience points that he had received. It had been a while since he saw over 1,000 experience points and it made him giddy with happiness. Good job everyone. William clapped his hands in approval. That was an impressive battle. Est smiled and nodded his head. For some reason, he liked getting praised by William. It was at that moment when a treasure chest appeared in the center of the room. William crossed his hands over his chest. He had no intention of taking the spoils of this battle. Est and the rest understood his stance as they crowded in front of the treasure chest with curiosity. Open it, young master, Ian urged. I want to see what is inside. Okay. Est nodded. He, too, was quite curious about what he was going to see inside the chest. The handsome boy lifted the lid of the chest and saw a pair of boots. William's smile stiffened as Est took out the pair of boots from the chest. He didn't need to use his appraisal skill to identify them, for they were the same boots he received when he won against the Hobgoblin leader in the past. Windborne boots. Wear light on your feet, go strong in your life. Agility +3. Perhaps it was by coincidence, but Est's gaze landed on William's boots. He then looked at the boots in his hand and saw that the two pairs of boots were identical. William whistled and looked at the ceiling of the Colosseum. For some reason, the stalactites that were hanging on the ceiling looked very interesting to him right now. Est cleared his throat as he showed the pair of boots to the rest. Who wants these boots? I don't need them. Kenneth politely declined Est's offer. I don't need them as well, young master, Isaac replied. Wait, these boots look oddly familiar. Ian frowned as he inspected the boots in Est's hand. He then looked at the boots of the annoying boy that was looking up at the ceiling and realized something. For a brief moment, Ian wanted to ask Est if he could have the boots for himself. However, when he saw Est's expression, he realized that his young master was giving him the "I dare you to ask for these boots" smiling face. Ian gave an awkward cough as he reluctantly took a step back to compromise. My boots are already good, young master, Ian said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Please, take the boots and use them well. Est's expression softened as he nodded his head in approval. Since none of you want them, then I'll gladly use them as a memento of our first boss fight. Est stored the Windborne boots inside his storage ring for the time being. As much as he wanted to wear the Windborne boots, now was not the time to do so. He then made a gesture for everyone to follow him, as he stepped into the glowing portal that would take them to the 11th floor of the dungeon. Chapter 157, Goblin Crypt Part 4. Why did it come to this? Spencer gazed at his twin sister who was being stripped of her clothing by one of the hobgoblin warriors. Wendy was unconscious and was not aware of the fate that was about to befall her. Wendy. Spencer tried to move his body to save his little sister. However, a foot pushed him back down. The young boy raised his head, only to find a gnarled staff pointed at his forehead. The hobgoblin shaman said a word, and Spencer instantly felt drowsy. The strong urge to sleep corroded his willpower, and before long, his body gave way as his consciousness sank into darkness. However, before he lost his consciousness entirely, he managed to activate the emblem on his uniform, and prayed that someone would be able to come and save his little sister from harm. As Spencer laid on the ground, unmoving, the other hobgoblin warriors had gathered around the unconscious girl. Lust could be seen in their eyes as they looked at the young and slender lady who would soon become their new broodmare. When the hobgoblins were about to do the deed, two whips of dark magic lashed out at them from the shadows. The hobgoblin warriors cried out in pain as they were all sent flying into the wall of the dungeon. A hobgoblin shaman who was a meter taller than the other hobgoblins appeared in the passageway. It carried a jeweled bronze staff in its hand, and its light green eyes glowed with power. This hobgoblin shaman was vastly different from the other shamans that could be found on the 14th floor. If William was here, he would definitely tell his party to run away and not engage it. For it was a creature that was just as strong as the guardian deer, Spire, that lived inside the enchanted forest. The tall hobgoblin shaman spoke a few words to the hobgoblin shaman who had already knelt on the floor. The vast difference in power made it submit itself willingly without resistance. The tall hobgoblin shaman ordered the other hobgoblins to carry the children and send them to where the other captives were being held. It also explicitly ordered the hobgoblins not to touch Wendy, for its master had already set his eyes on her. Although the hobgoblin warriors were reluctant, they didn't dare defy the shaman's orders. Spencer, Brutus, and Bruno were carried like a sack of goods on the hobgoblin warriors' shoulders. The tall hobgoblin shaman personally picked up Wendy in a princess carry as it took her to the place where its master had gathered the other captives. Read lat.st chapters at no.v.e.l.bin/c/o/m only. When they arrived at the location, the shaman covered Wendy's body with a robe, before placing her inside a cage. Spencer and the rest were also locked up in different cages. After seeing that everything was in order, the hobgoblin shaman cast a deep slumber spell on all the captives, so that they would continue to sleep. Its master had already made his own arrangements and it only needed to play its role for its master's sake. Suddenly, it received a new order from its master to leave the 14th floor and head towards the 15th floor as soon as possible. Its master added that it should continue to travel to the 19th floor and stay there until further notice. Although the hobgoblin shaman was confused by this new order, it still followed it without fail. Clearly, its master didn't want anyone to know of its existence. It was a creature that roamed between the 14th and 19th floors of the dungeon to do its master's bidding. The reason for its existence was to provide its master with new slaves that its subordinates had captured inside the dungeon. That was the role it played, and it was more than happy to do its master's bidding. Let's hurry. William urged his party as they ran across the 14th floor of the dungeon. Along the way, students of the academy that were also on the same floor followed behind them. They had received a distress call coming from a student, and it was standard procedure to come to their aid. This was a strict rule that was implemented in the Hellan Royal Academy when a batch of students were exploring a dungeon. They were duty-bound to rescue their schoolmates once the distress signal had been activated. Right now, more than 20 students of the Royal Academy, ranging from first years up to third years, were heading to the spot where the signal had been sent. Kent had noticed their movements and a slight frown appeared on his face. He, and his group, followed behind the students and asked them what was happening. The student he asked briefly mentioned the situation. Kent listened patiently and nodded his head in understanding. His group's expressions suddenly became serious, but Kent gave them all a stare that shut them up. Kent placed his hand inside his pocket and touched a red jewel the size of a quail's egg. A minute later, he removed his hand from the pocket and continued to follow the students who were making their way to the western part of the dungeon. A third-year martial student was in the lead as he held his sword in his hand. He spotted 2 hobgoblin shamans ahead as well as 6 hobgoblin warriors. He immediately gave his party the order to attack and ensure that they would be finished off as quickly as possible. These third-years were a regular party that explored the goblin crypt. They could be called veterans when fighting against hobgoblin shamans, and they took the lead in rescuing their fellow students. The hobgoblin shamans fired their curses, but they were easily intercepted by the magic of the clerics who were among the group of students. The numerical advantage played in their favor as they disposed of all the monsters that blocked their way. The group stopped at an intersection where the path was divided into 3. They didn't randomly choose a direction. Instead, they asked the red-headed boy where they needed to go. "Where should we go next?" The third-year martial student, Harrison, asked William, who seemed to be aware of the missing student's location. "The left one," William replied. "My friends are only 200 meters away from our location. We're almost there." Harrison nodded and led the way. 5 minutes later, they found several hobgoblin warriors who seemed to be guarding a man-made enclosure. There was no need to say anything and a fight broke out immediately. William and his party joined the clash. All of them were feeling anxious because they knew the identities of the missing students. Surprisingly, there were no hobgoblin shamans present in the enclosure. The dozen hobgoblin warriors were easily dealt with, and Harrison, and the other students, destroyed the cages where several people lay unconscious. "Wendy, wake up." Est held the unconscious girl's shoulder as he shook her awake. "Wake up." He was very careful in shaking her, for the girl had only a robe draped over her body. Est's senses had told him that aside from being completely naked, Wendy was still a pure maiden. The hobgoblins weren't able to taint her, which made William and the others sigh in relief. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Novel Bin read light novel, Webnovel, Korean novel and Chinese novel online for free. You can find hundreds of English translated light novel, Webnovel, Korean novel and Chinese novel which are daily updated. Read novels online, read light novel online, read online free, free light novel online. Chapter 158, Goblin Crypt End. Please stand aside. A third-year student, who seemed to be a cleric, tapped Est's shoulder. "She's under a powerful sleep spell. Normal means won't wake her up." The holy magic of clerics were powerful counters for dark magic and curses. Usually, when a group tried to fight against creatures who wielded dark magic, bringing a cleric would increase their chances of not getting wiped out in a battle. Est nodded his head in understanding and stepped away. The lady student pressed her hand over Wendy's forehead and chanted. "Dispel," the lady said as her hand glowed with magical power. When the glow receded, Wendy's eyelids fluttered. She then opened her eyes and looked around in a daze. "Wendy, can you remember what happened?" Est asked immediately after Wendy opened her eyes. Head Prefect. Wendy was still half awake and couldn't process the current situation. The lady cleric sighed and gave Est the "I'll leave this to you" look. She then stood up and went to check the other captives for injuries. Est took out a blanket from his storage ring and wrapped it firmly around the young lady who was still in a daze. Kenneth, Ian, and Isaac made a protective perimeter around them to prevent anyone from sneaking glances at Wendy. While Est was trying to get answers from Wendy, William was interrogating Spencer, who had woken up a minute earlier than his twin sister. He had seen Wendy's state and almost made a commotion. Fortunately, William was there. The shepherd immediately delivered a punch to Spencer's stomach which rendered him unable to move due to pain. While the boy was curled up like a shrimp, William told him that his sister was unharmed. After hearing William's explanation, Spencer finally calmed down and cooperated with William's interrogation. 2 whips that seemed to be made from dark energy attacked you from your blind spots and allowed the goblin shaman to fire its curses at all of you. William frowned. Also, you saw hands materialized out of thin air that helped the goblin shaman rain down curses on your group. Are you sure this is what you saw? I'm sure of it, Head Prefect, Spencer answered firmly. I swear it to the gods. Calm down, William patted his shoulder. I'm not saying that I don't believe you. I'm just trying to understand how your party ended up in this manner. William didn't doubt Spencer's words, because he was very familiar with the sneak attack that rendered them unable to battle. The 2 skills Spencer mentioned were 2 of the high-end skills that belonged to the Dark Mage job class. Spectral Hand. 10 mana points. Summons a ghostly hand that moves as you desire, allowing you to deliver low-level, touch-range spells at a distance. The Spectral Hand is also able to use Dark Whip. Dark Whip. 10 mana points. Conjures a whip of dark energy. Can be used to attack, defend, or let the user maneuver over the terrain. No more than 2 dark whips can be created at a time. Damage dealt is equivalent to Intelligence x2. William had used these 2 skills when he fought against the Cyclops inside the Trial of Courage. He was well aware of how flexible these 2 attacks were. However, based on Spencer's story, the hobgoblin shaman they fought were not able to use these 2 abilities. That only meant one thing. There was a high-tier hobgoblin shaman that attacked them from the shadows. As William continued his interrogation, the clerics among the students had woken everyone from their slumber. Aside from Spencer, Wendy, Brutus, and Bruno, there were 12 other people who had become captives of the hobgoblin warriors. These people were locals of Hartlepool and had only come to the 14th floor to try their luck in getting better monster drops. Harrison scanned the surroundings with a grim expression. As someone who was familiar with the hobgoblins of the Goblin Crypt, he found the hobgoblins' actions very unnatural. Goblins were well known to only capture female adventurers, and dispose of the men. They used these women in order to breed and increase their numbers, so capturing the girls was understandable. What he didn't understand was why the goblins spared the men. Aside from superficial injuries, most of them were unscathed. Also, the cages where the captives were locked up were well made. It was impossible for hobgoblins to create such cages, which only led to one thing. They were created by humans. Both of you are head prefects, correct? Harrison asked Est and William, who were tending to their friends. Yes, Est answered. William nodded his head. Immediately notify the school and ask them to send a team to investigate. Harrison. Tell them that there's a possibility of foul play inside the dungeon. EU updates tnbell/by.com. Foul play was the code word that someone was capturing adventurers to be sold as slaves. This was a common thing in most dungeon towns and cities, and that meant that the officials managing the dungeon were in cahoots with the slave traders. When this violation was proven true by the officers of the king, all violators would be sent to the kingdom's mining areas where they would spend the rest of their lives mining for ores. A brief flash of killing intent flashed across Kent's eyes, but disappeared the next moment. He was regretting the fact that he had targeted the students of the Royal Academy. I need to ensure that I leave no traces behind, Kent thought as he gestured for his men to leave the area. I have to keep a low profile for the time being. Kent activated the teleport crystal in his hand, which would send him back to the entrance of the dungeon. He needed to leave the town as soon as possible and tell his accomplices to cease all operations until things cooled down. This will make it hard for me to reach the quota for the next few months. Kent sighed as he calculated his losses. I got too greedy. Kent knew that the students in the Royal Academy were considered to be very talented individuals. When he saw Wendy, he knew that the pretty young lady would fetch a very high price in the black market. Frankly, Kent had no thoughts of selling her. He was more interested in turning her into his personal slave. Kent had seen a glimpse of Wendy's fighting ability through the eyes of his slave. He could tell that she was a rough gem waiting to be polished. If he could make Wendy his slave, he was confident that after a week or two, he would be able to train her into a loyal servant who would happily open her legs and allow him to ravage her as he wished. Sadly, the opportunity had been lost, and it also brought a lot of problems in its wake. Kent knew that an investigation would be held and the guards manning the dungeon would be replaced. The town mayor might also lose his position if he couldn't convince the officers of the king that he had no part in the slave trading that was being done inside his own town. Kent was not optimistic that his old pal would be able to lie his way through this event. Half of the payment for the slaves went to Kent, while the other half went to the town mayor. Both of them had worked together for many years, and the latter would definitely be proven guilty by the officers of the kingdom. I really regret it, Kent sighed again as he rode in a carriage that was headed towards the town's gate. I have no choice but to return using a new identity and start from scratch again. While Kent was making his escape, William and his party escorted Spencer, Wendy, Brutus, and Bruno towards the guard captain of the academy, who was stationed at the teleport gates. They needed to file a report so that the staff of the academy in Hartlepool could be made aware of the suspected foul play that had targeted the students of the Hellan Royal Academy. Chapter 159. You can repay me with your body. Thank you for saving me, Wendy said as she enclosed William's hand with her two hands. If not for head prefect William, I might have already been. William looked at her with a gentle gaze as he patted her shoulder. I'm not the only one who came to rescue you. Est and the other students of the academy were there to lend their help. Also, it was your big brother, Spencer, who activated the school's emblem to call for help. If you have to thank someone, you should thank him first. Wendy nodded her head. I will thank Big Brother later, but it was the head prefect who found our location. If there is anything I can do to repay you, please, tell me and I will do my best to meet your expectations. William wanted to tease the little girl and say you can repay me with your body, but he immediately changed his mind when he felt 4 killing intents lock onto his back. William was sure that if he decided to go ahead with his plan to tease Wendy, Spencer's spear and a few other sharp weapons would pierce his back. The red-headed boy lightly coughed and put on a righteous expression. Wendy, you are a student of the Hellan Royal Academy. As fellow students, it is only right and proper that I extend my help. There is no need for a reward. However, if you really insist on giving me a reward, the one thing you can do for me is to keep yourself safe. It pains my heart to see someone as beautiful as you suffer. Please, take care of yourself for me, won't you? William thought that his award-winning performance was enough to pacify the people who had the intention of turning him into a human barbecue. What he didn't expect was that their killing intent only grew stronger as Wendy looked up at him with an infatuated gaze. I will keep myself safe and pure for head prefect, Wendy stuttered as her face turned beet red. Wendy is willing to wait until the head prefect comes of age. When that time comes, I will. Wendy said something, but it was too soft and low for William to hear and understand. Even so, William thought that the young lady was only saying her gratitude to him. Yes, please keep yourself safe and pure for me. William smiled. I like Wendy, so I hope that you will grow up to be a strong and beautiful lady that will protect the weak from those who try to oppress them. Head prefect likes me. You bet? I really like Wendy a lot. I like you, too, head prefect. The feeling is mutual then. William chuckled. Suddenly, William's sixth sense screamed of danger as all the hairs at the back of his neck stood on end. The shepherd immediately jumped to the side as he evaded the spear that was thrust at his back by mere centimeters. Big brother, what are you doing? Wendy raised her voice in anger. How dare you get in the way of my intimate moment with head prefect William? Tisk. Spencer clicked his tongue because he missed his target. I'm sorry, head prefect. My spear suddenly moved on its own. I apologize if I scared you. Ha ha ha. Don't worry, I'm not hurt. Just be careful next time. William nodded his head in understanding. Fool, what do you mean your spear suddenly moved on its own? Do you think I'm stupid? HMP? Wait till we return to the academy, I'll make sure to straighten you up. William was about to say something else when he felt someone pinch the side of his waist. He almost screamed like a little girl due to the pain. Fortunately, he was able to close his lips in time as he endured the sudden pain that came out of nowhere. When the pain subsided, the red-headed boy glared at Ian, who was standing right next to him. What's your problem? William asked with a hateful glare. Sorry, my hand moved on its own, Ian said with a smile. Are you hurt, head prefect? William's lips twitched in anger when he heard the snot-nosed pansy's reply. Why are you acting like a jealous girlfriend? Are you jealous because I'm more handsome than you? Do you want me to give you some beauty tips? The two bickering buddies were about to have a go at each other, like usual, so Est immediately separated the two of them and stood in the middle. All right, settle down, Est said as he pushed both boys away from each other. The teleport gate will activate in 10 minutes. Don't make a scene or we might get punished when we return to the academy. HMP. HMP. William and Ian snorted at the same time. Est looked at the two of them with a fed-up expression as if he had already given up trying to convince the two boys to get along with each other. Read lat.st chapters at no.v.e.l.bin/c/o/m only. Everyone thought that the situation had finally calmed down, but that thought instantly vanished when the infatuated girl, Wendy, appeared beside William and held his hand like it was a very normal thing for her to do. Head prefect, I forgot to ask. How were you able to find us? Wendy asked with upturned eyes. Her eyes were so clear and bright that William could see his face reflected in them. It's good that nothing really happened to you, William thought. That was his genuine feelings in regards to Wendy. William felt that it would really be tragic if someone as kind and caring as Wendy were to lose the brilliance in her eyes because of this incident. I'm glad we made it in time, William muttered his thoughts out loud. Head prefect. Wendy tilted her head in a cute manner which gave William a strong urge to pinch her cheeks. Remembering the girl's question, William cleared his throat to give the excuse he had prepared beforehand. The one who found your location was Mama Ella, William answered. Me. The Angarian goat tilted her head in confusion. You see, Mama Ella has a very sensitive nose. She can easily find me, even if we are miles apart. Me. Ella nodded her head in acknowledgement. Although William was spouting nonsense about the sensitivity of her nose, it was true that she could find William even if they were miles apart. I see. Thank you, Mama Ella. Wendy bowed her head towards William's mother. From now on, can I also call you Mama? Me. I was just joking. Me. Wendy hugged Ella with a big smile on her face as she thanked the goat for helping to save her. I guess I need to take things slowly. Ella is much smarter than I thought. William looked at this touching scene while scratching his cheeks. He felt bad about lying to Wendy, but he couldn't possibly tell her that he had placed a tracker on her and Spencer. He didn't want others to think that he was a stalker. While the shepherd was thinking of these mundane thoughts, Est, Ian, and Spencer looked at him as if they were looking at a dead person. Inside their minds, they had already butchered him countless times already. Only the delicate-looking Kenneth looked at this scene with a smile on his face. Chapter 160, A Tale of Tears, Blood, and Suffering. When William and the rest returned to the academy, they were immediately summoned by the dean and hurriedly brought to his office. This was the first time that William had entered the dean's office since he enrolled at the Royal Academy. The room was less extravagant than he initially thought it would be. He could even say that it is quite plain. Nothing stood out enough to make it look like the room of the most powerful person inside the academy. However, although the room had nothing to offer, the person sitting in the chair facing William and the others was a different matter. Such a strong presence, William thought. Although the dean was only sitting on his chair, William felt as if a mountain was pressing down on his shoulders. He knew that the dean wasn't doing this on purpose, but it was similar to the presence held by his master, Celine, and his grandpa, James, when they were planning to do something serious. Thank you for coming, the dean of the academy, Simon Otis Beasley, said with a smile. Please, sit down and tell me everything that happened from start to finish. Everyone sat down, and Spencer started to narrate their tale. While Wendy's twin brother was telling his version of the story, William observed the dean of the academy. Simon had long blonde hair tied in a ponytail behind his back. His light green eyes were clear and bright. His pointy ears, that revealed his identity as an elf, listened seriously to Spencer's accounts of what happened. From all looks and angles, he looked like a man in his late 20s. However, since he was an elf, it made his age very hard to determine. William's master, Celine, was 28 years old. However, she looked like a young lady who had just turned 20. The red-headed boy had a feeling that even if 100 years were to pass, Celine would still look as she did now. Thank you for sharing your story, Simon commented. We will investigate this matter. Simon then scanned the students inside his office and gave another announcement. Starting today, the Goblin Crypt will be inaccessible to the Academy for the duration of the investigation. I know that this incident has caused everyone some inconveniences, so I've decided to award each and every one of you 5,000 Academy points. Simon waved his hand and 5 white coins hovered in front of each student. The Academy will not turn a blind eye on everyone's heroic efforts. I pray that in the future, you will continue to protect the safety of the students of the Royal Academy and uphold our dignity. The eyes of the third years widened when they saw the 5 white coins floating in front of them. Each white coin was equivalent to 1,000 Academy points. Usually, you could only earn 1,000 points once you finished 4 to 5 missions on the Academy's bulletin board. Aside from the first years, who didn't know how lucky they were, the rest of the students were feeling giddy because a meat pie had fallen from the sky. With this, they would be able to exchange for rare skills, weapons, armors, accessories, and many more items that were only exclusive in the exchange office of the Royal Academy. Before I forget. Simon cleared his throat. This matter will be confidential. Don't tell anyone what happened inside the dungeon. We don't want the perpetrators to get wind of our investigation, so all of you must act accordingly. Do I make myself clear? Yes, sir. Good. Simon nodded his head. All of you may leave, except for Mr. Ainsworth. I still have a few questions to ask you. Est and the others gave William a glance before leaving the room. When the door of the office closed, only 2 people and 1 goat remained inside Simon's office. William didn't know why the dean asked him to stay. The latter busied himself in preparing tea, leaving William to ponder Simon's intention. 10 minutes later, Simon poured 2 cups of tea and placed one of them in front of William. The red-headed boy said his thanks before drinking the cup that was specially prepared just for him. The moment the tea entered William's mouth, he felt a refreshing taste that he had never felt before. It washed away the exhaustion and anxiety that he was currently feeling from the events that had happened inside the Goblin Crypt. Simon smiled as he observed William. He picked up his own cup of tea and drank it. A few minutes of peace passed before Simon finally decided to break the ice. Fiend up Ted Ovals on n/v/elbin.co/m. How is Celine? Simon asked. Is she doing well in Lant? William returned the teacup on top of the table and looked at Simon with caution. Seeing the young boy's guarded expression, Simon chuckled and raised both of his hands in surrender. I meant no harm to you or your master, Simon said. Master? I don't have any master, William commented. What are you talking about, sir? William knew that the Helan Kingdom had banned the use of dark magic. He was not gullible enough to expose his master's condition nor whereabouts to a stranger, even if that person was the dean of the Royal Academy. Simon had an amused expression as he eyed the handsome half-elf in front of him. He was quite satisfied with William's reply because he didn't acknowledge anything that might compromise his master. She found a good disciple, Simon thought as his eyes landed on the mithril collar on William's neck. So, this is the child of Arwen and Maxwell. Lady Fate is truly a fickle lady. William noticed that the Academy Dean was looking at his collar with a gentle gaze. Even so, he was firm in his decision to protect his master's whereabouts and identity. Did you know? I was one of the makers of that collar hanging on your neck, Simon stated. The collar of Wisteria, a special collar that was crafted to enslave a young elf named Celine because of the power of darkness that ran through her veins. William's eyes narrowed as he unconsciously clenched his fists that were lying on top of his lap. This collar was used to enslave Master. William felt his heart shudder. These bastards. William wanted to ask questions, but he resisted the urge and pressed his lips firmly together. He was afraid that he would start to hurl curses at the Academy's dean due to the anger that was rising inside his chest. Simon noticed the change in William's expression, but he didn't say anything about it. Instead, he continued his tale as if he was reminiscing out loud. I can still remember her lifeless expression when she wore that same collar on her neck. Back then, everyone in the elf village disdained and scorned her for being impure. She was also subjected to very harsh training. Yes, she was subjected to torture using dark magic. Simon drank the remaining tea in his cup to wet his throat. When he was done, he returned it to the table and spoke once more. I don't know how an 8-year-old was able to take that kind of training, Simon continued. There were times when she would return home and her dress would be dyed with her own blood. That is not something that any 8-year-old should experience. It was inhumane. William's fist was starting to shake for he knew just how terrible and painful it was to be subjected to such torture using black magic. Simon sighed before looking up at the ceiling. When her training ended, she thought that everyone in the village would be able to accept her, but she was wrong. The elves are a proud race. They disdain anything that isn't pure. Although they tolerate half-elves in their territories, they also make them feel that they weren't welcome. Ha, such narrow-minded fools. On Celine's 12th birthday, she was exiled from the village and sent to the Dark Elves to continue her training. There, she suffered untold horrors. Horrors that any teenage girl would never dream to experience. This lasted until she turned 20 years old. Her grandfather, Darwin, personally went to bring her back from the northern continent. The Celine that came back with him was no longer the child that hoped for acceptance and love. Since the Silver Moon continent wouldn't accept her existence, Darwin decided to take her to the southern continent where his old friend lived. There, he hoped that Celine would regain the things that she had lost during her childhood. When she arrived at Lant, that was also the day when the collar on her neck was finally removed. Simon's gaze shifted and locked onto the collar on William's neck. The collar you wear on your neck right now was dyed with her own tears, blood, and suffering. Do you know? That collar is the most precious and hateful thing in her possession. A collar she had to wear in order to tell others that she had no intention of hurting them or anyone else. A collar that she was forced to wear so that others will feel safe in her presence. That is the history of the collar of Wisteria. A legacy of how the proud elven race chained up a young girl because they were afraid of some stupid prophecy. A prophecy that would bring them to their knees. Simon sneered. Didn't it even occur to them that if they showed her love and compassion, she would repay them in full? Perhaps they did, but they are a proud race. Elves are such a stupid race. A very stupid race. Simon ridiculed and mocked the elves as if he didn't belong to their race. The dean of the academy sighed one more time, before waving his hand. You may go, Simon ordered. The next time you see your master, know that your own suffering wasn't even a tenth of what she experienced in her lifetime. Make sure to treasure her well. William walked out of the dean's office in a daze, followed by his mama Ella. He didn't even know how he managed to return to his own room. Simon's tale was still circulating inside his head and it made him feel angry and ashamed at the same time. Angry because of how much suffering his master had gone through and shame for cursing his master, Celine, in his heart during the first few weeks of his own suffering.